Chapter 1490. Refining the Inata Tower. However, when the destructive power was about to reach Jian Chun, he suddenly removed a damaged piece of armor from his space ring and equipped it. Taji's armor. The red-robed boy immediately cried out when he spotted the armor. His face was filled with disbelief, and soon afterward, he and Jian Chun were drowned by the destructive power. After quite some time, the destructive power from the immortal emperor's essence blood vanished, and the entire floor returned to peace once again. The space on the 9th floor of the Inata Tower still existed. The eruption of the blood was like a tiny wave in the vast ocean, unable to damage the tower at all. The sky possessed the same color, while the projection of the heavenly palace of Bisheng continued to radiate a blinding, golden light. Probably only the cracked ground recorded the brutal scene from earlier. Jian Chun and the red-robed boy had vanished from the world as well. Neither one of their presences lingered on the 9th floor. Only a damaged piece of armor silently lay on the ground. It was covered with dirt while the person who had been wearing it was nowhere to be seen. At this moment, light suddenly began to flicker from within the dirty, damaged piece of armor. The next moment, a ball of light flew out and hovered in the air. Only now was the figure of a person visible. He was only as tall as a finger, but glowed with a white light. It was the origin energy of radiant Saint Force. A golden speck of light flickered within the finger-sized person, and at a closer glance, it was actually a tiny golden tower. This was naturally Jian Chun's soul. After the drop of a mortal emperor's blood had erupted, he was unable to completely protect himself, even with the help of the damaged armor. His body was destroyed, but in a crucial moment, he hid his soul in the armor, which was why he was able to escape disaster. Jian Chun's soul hovered in the air and looked around. He then sat down where he was. In a few seconds, a thrum seeming to ring out. The Ziying sword and Qing Sua sword erupted from the dirt and emerged from the ground. They arrived beside Jian Chun's soul. They thrummed loudly, guarding him. Soon a bloody thing flew out of the soul. It hovered below Jian Chun's soul. To no surprise, it was a piece of Jian Chun's flesh. The soil near Jian Chun began to surge after the first piece of flesh appeared. More bloody pieces burst forth before gathering below Jian Chun's soul. As more and more pieces of flesh gathered from the surroundings, a body completely formed from the remains of various sizes gradually gathered. It was covered with blood, but powerful energy pulsed in each droplet of blood. Jian Chun looked down and saw the body formed from mincemeat. He sighed as he shook his head. He had already devoted everything he had to gathering his own flesh and blood, but a section of it had been destroyed by the power of laws, and was completely gone, making it impossible to gather. Jian Chun gathered all the pieces of his body he could sense right now, but there were only enough to reassemble a major portion of his body. He still needed his own power to regenerate the other parts. Fortunately, the vitality of the chaotic body was extremely great. Coupled with his abilities as a Class 9, Radiant Saint Master, making a full recovery was nothing difficult. With a thought Class 9, Radiant Saint Force origin energy immediately flew out of his soul. It turned into an extremely dense white light, which enveloped his ruined body. Meanwhile, his chaotic Niden spewed out strands of chaotic force. The chaotic force was circulated everywhere, not only forcing his flesh to quickly regrow, but it also sped up the regeneration process. Under the dual effects of chaotic force in Class 9, Radiant Saint Force origin energy, Jian Chun's missing pieces slowly began to regrow. All the cracks and wounds on the body he had pieced together rapidly disappeared as well. Even all his blood flowed back into his body, returning to his flesh. At the same time, streams of chaotic blood, still wet and hidden beneath the soil, all burst forth and flew out of the ground. They all returned to Jian Chun's body through his mouth. The chaotic blood was significant to Jian Chun. Although it was possible for him to replenish the missing blood with his chaotic body, it would exhaust a large amount of chaotic blood. Jian Chun would not have needed to care if he had only lost a small portion of his blood, but basically all his blood had been scattered across the land. He needed to get it all back. Fortunately, he cultivated the chaotic body, so every piece of flesh and drop of blood was connected to his consciousness. Finding the droplets was not particularly difficult. Jian Chun had never been so injured before. He had been reduced to a soul. If his soul had not hidden in the damaged armor, he probably would have died. He had truly been embroiled in a battle of life and death against the artifact's spirit. It had been a very long time since Jianchen had come so close to death. He used more time than he usually would spend recovering in order to rejuvenate his missing parts. He finally made a full recovery after 2 whole days, and had used 3 whole strands of Class 9, Radiant Saint Force Origin energy. Jianchen removed his space ring from the artifact's space, and slowly placed it on his finger. He then took out a new set of clothes from his space ring, and changed into them. He silently sensed the body that he had just recovered and realized that the comprehensions of the way of the sword had not been destroyed, allowing him to let out a breath of relief. At the same time, he discovered that the 4 strands of sword qi were still hidden within his right arm, but since they had been overused, it was extremely difficult for them to dish out strong attacks. Even though they could still force out attacks at receival, they were nowhere near as powerful as a strike from Jianchen with the Ziying sword. This artifact's spirit should have dispersed due to the explosion of the blood as well. After all, he had already been weakened after the battle with me. He wouldn't have had the power to flee when he was so close to me, Jianchen thought. Even though the battle against the artifact's spirit was extremely brutal, he was a Class 9, Radiant Saint Master, so as long as his soul remained, he could recover his body very quickly, unlike regular experts who needed a very long period of time and high-quality medicine. Jianchen possessed a huge advantage with this aspect. He did not have to worry about being injured. He could even recover his wounds during battle. Jianchen picked the damaged piece of divine armor that had saved his life off the ground. He gently brushed off the dust on it. He could not help but think back to what the artifact's spirit had said when he had pulled out the essence blood, and his shocked expression when he saw the armor in his final moments after making the blood explode. The master of this armor is called Taji. I never thought that he'd actually be the disciple of the Anata Grand Prime. Looks like the remains scattered throughout the Sea of Despair were left behind by him, Jianchen thought. He pondered. Looks like the Anata Grand Prime engaged in a great battle here with his disciple, and probably died during that battle, which is why the Anata Tower ended up here. If the Anata Grand Prime didn't fall, he definitely would have recovered some strength after so much time, and would have found it difficult to remove the seal from the Nirvanic Immortal Exalt. After a moment of silent thought, Jianchen focused his attention. His eyes landed on the projection of the heavenly palace of Bixing nearby. He seemed to see a pure white stone tablet within it. The stone tablet was physical and not a projection. It seemed like it had always existed on the 9th floor, and had probably been covered up by the projection of the palace. The stone tablet seemed to belong within the palace. Jianchen walked toward the palace. There were a total of 999 steps outside the palace. They were illusory as well. He could clearly see the ground beneath them. Jianchen hesitated as he stood before the steps. He placed his foot on one to test it out. But to his surprise, even though the steps were illusory, they seemed solid when he stood on them. Jianchen made his way up the steps step by step. He was heading toward the palace. He entered the structure, and made his way to the pure white tablet. The stone tablet was white like jade, and as smooth as a mirror. It was 300 meters tall. When Jianchen stood before it, he felt like an ant standing before an elephant. Master, this should be the control center for the Anata Tower. Let out your soul, and use your consciousness to sense it. Ziying's voice rang out. The 2 swords were revolving around Jianchen, watching over him. Jianchen closed his eyes and let out his soul. He gradually approached the tablet with his consciousness, and when he successfully entered the tablet immediately spat out a piece of information. Jianchen opened his eyes and excitedly stared at the tablet. The tablet just happened to be something crucial for controlling the Anata Tower. He had obtained the refinement method from it. There are 9 layers of the Anata Tower to refine. Refining the first layer will grant you the most basic controls of the tower. The more layers you refine, the more control you will have over the power. At the same time, the power you can use will grow. You can only use all of the tower's power after you refine all 9 layers. Chapter 1491. The Anata Grand Prime. Senior Tianjian has spent 10 years and is still not done refining the divine hall from Mercenary City with his strength as a Saint Emperor. The Anata Tower is clearly much greater than that divine hall, so I wonder how much time I'll need to refine the first layer of the Anata Tower with my current strength. Jianshan wondered inside before hesitating. The world of Forsaken Saints would invade again in 2 or 3 years. He did not know if he could refine the first layer of the Anata Tower within that time frame. Don't worry, Master. The Anata Tower may be a supreme quality god artifact, but there are 9 steps to refining it. It is indeed impossible for Master to refine the whole tower with your current strength, but you shouldn't take long to refine the first layer with our help, said Ziying. The Ziying sword arrived above Jianshan's head and projected a handsome young man in violet robes. Master will help you out. The Qing Sua sword also arrived above Jianshan's head, projecting a beauty in an azure dress. Jianshan clenched his teeth and said, "If that's the case, let's try to take this tower with us before the foreign world invades again." Jianshan immediately sat down. With assistance from the sword spirits, he began to devote himself to refining the stone tablet. As Jianshan refined the 300-meter-tall tablet before him, it immediately experienced some changes. From the very bottom, the pure white tablet gradually darkened, and the dark color spread up at an extremely gradual rate. The dark portion was the part that Jianshan had successfully refined. When the entire tablet turned black, he would become the second master of the Anata Tower. However, the refinement process became more difficult the further he advanced. When the darkness had reached a height of 3 meters, it visibly slowed down. Unknowingly, Jianshan had already spent a year refining the tablet. During that year, he had refined 90% of the first layer. However, the final part was far more difficult than he had imagined. Jianshan poured everything he had into it, but he was still progressing slowly. However, Jianshan did not give up. He desperately refined it, and finally, after another half a year, he successfully refined the first layer. A ninth of the giant tablet was now dark. The darkness represented that Jianshan had successfully refined the first layer of the Anata Tower. He could not utilize the basic controls of the structure. Jianshan slowly opened his eyes. His forehead was currently covered with sweat. He was exhausted, but there was an uncontainable excitement in his eyes. The current him could clearly feel a mental connection with the Anata Tower. He could vaguely sense everything in the tower, on all 9 floors. However, he could only sense the 2nd to the 9th second floor in haze. As for the first floor, he could sense it extremely clearly. He could even vaguely gain an idea as to what was going on in the dark regions that had been annihilated by the Nirvanic Immortal Exalt. The annihilated regions seemed as vast as the night sky to Jianshan. They were unimaginably tremendous. Even the Tianyuan continent did not seem to be 1/100th of the dark regions. The Anata Grand Prime's treasury really exists on the 9th floor, Jianshan murmured to himself. His eyes shone. He appeared 100 meters away in the next moment, like he had teleported. He gazed at some empty space before him. The treasury's been hidden in a spatial crack on the 9th floor by the Anata Grand Prime. Even the artifact spirit can't open it. Only the master of the tower can. It's just a pity that I'm too weak right now, so I still can't open it yet. Jianshan gently exhaled in disappointment. In a flash, he returned to the heavenly palace of Bisheng. I'm actually unable to sense the existence of this palace at all. It must be a projection left behind by the Anata Grand Prime through an ability in the past. Jianshan stared at the palace for a while before entering it with long strides. A while later, Jianshan arrived in one of the halls within the palace. He stood at the entrance and stared ahead. There was a structure made from white jade at the end of the hall. It was only the size of a millstone and seemed like a cushion for meditation. Jianshan's gaze stopped on the stone structure that was only 3 inches tall for a while. He then looked behind it. A statue stood there. The statue depicted a woman in white clothes. Her figure was slender, her beauty indescribable. She stood there with her head slightly raised, as if she was staring at the void. She did not give off a shocking presence, but seemed to have combined and resonated with the world, a transformation of nature itself, having become a law. Who's that? Is that the Inata Grand Prime? Jianchen stood at the entrance and stared at the beauty in a daze. He found it very hard to believe the reality that the Inata Grand Prime, one of the 3 strongest experts in the saint's world, was female. Ziying and Qing Sua appeared. They also stared at the woman's statue in a daze, and only after quite some time did Ziying say, "Former master once clashed with the Inata Grand Prime several times, but he was surrounded by the ways of the world, causing him to become enshrouded. There's basically no one in our immortal's world who's seen his true appearance." At the same time, his voice was always fused with the ways of the world, having changed to contain all the sounds of the world, so it was impossible to tell his gender. In reality, there's many Grand Primes in the saint's world who've never seen his true appearance either. The heavenly balance of Bishing is the Inata Grand Prime's residence. There's no doubt about that. Yet, there's actually a statue like this in his residence. So is this really the Inata Grand Prime's true appearance? Or is this woman the most important person to the Inata Grand Prime? Qing Sua gently furrowed her brows and stared at the statue out of curiosity. Sigh. At this moment, a vague sigh reverberated through the entire illusory palace. It was a female's voice and sounded extremely gentle and pleasant. It was enough to take people aback, but it also seemed to be weathered, having gone through and experienced many things in the past. Jianchen immediately became shocked when he heard the voice. He looked around but failed to discover anyone at all. He did not succeed at discovering the origins of the voice either. The voice seemed to echo through the entire palace, possibly the entire floor of the tower. Ziying and Qing Sua narrowed their eyes. They had also heard the sigh and looked around, but they failed to discover anything either. This isn't the voice of the tower spirit, nor is it the voice that we're familiar with from the Inata Grand Prime. It's not the Nirvanic Immortal Exalt's voice either, Ziying said with a heavy voice. May I ask who you are? Jianchen asked. He looked around cautiously. He could vaguely sense everything on the 9th floor, but the palace exceeded his senses. His soul was suppressed in the palace as well, so it was completely useless. I've waited here for over 3 million years for someone to finally come. You are the first after all that time. The vague voice rang out once again. It echoed through the entire hall, making it difficult to discover its origins. However, a hazy, white figure gradually emerged from the statue of the woman near the end of the palace. The figure was very hazy at the start, only a rough silhouette. However, it gradually cleared up, and her facial features became visible. She looked just like the statue, not only possessing the same charm, but the same bearing as well. Jianchen was shocked inside when he saw the illusory figure. He carefully glanced at the azulate swords, and immediately felt rather unsettled. He asked with a heavy voice, "Are you the Inata Grand Prime?" "I am indeed Inata," the figure said with a gentle voice. She stared off into the distance as complicated emotions and memories clouded her eyes. Jianchen's heart sank, and his face became extremely ugly. Never would he have thought that the Inata Grand Prime would appear here. Even though the illusionary figure he was seeing right now was probably only a clone of her, it was still terrible news to him. He refused to believe that the Inata Grand Prime did not recognize the azulate swords. Since they were with him, it also meant that he had exposed his connection with the immortal's world. He might have even gotten the Inata Grand Prime to believe that he was a part of that world. The immortal's world and the saint's world stood on opposing sides. The Inata Grand Prime had fought the Nirvanic Immortal Exalt in the past. This was a horrible situation for him. Jianchen could even imagine the hellish moment he headed to the saint's world after his connection to the immortal's world spread through the saint's world. Jianchen's face sank. The light in his eyes flickered uneasily. At that moment, he was tempted to disperse the Inata Grand Prime's figure, but he was uncertain about the strength of the clone, so he did not act recklessly for the time being. The Inata Grand Prime did not seem to notice the changes in Jianchen's expression. Her gaze remained fixated on the distant sky. She slowly said, "Back then, I fought the greatest expert of the immortal's world, the Nirvanic Immortal Exalt. I was not his opponent, so I fled with heavy injuries. When I made my way back to the saint's world, my disciple Taji suddenly ambushed me. Caught off guard, he succeeded, so I became even more injured. It was also at that moment when I suddenly realized that my disciple had been secretly working with the Grand Prime Yenzun. He wanted to kill me while I was heavily injured and take my extreme comprehensions of the laws of fire. I engaged in a battle of life and death against the Grand Prime Yenzun and my traitor of a disciple. I managed to kill my wretched disciple, but I was just too heavily injured from the battle against the Nirvanic Immortal Exalt, and the Inata Tower had been severely damaged as well. It had also been suppressed by the sword formations of the Nirvanic Immortal Exalt, so I was unable to use its power. As a result, I failed to kill Yenzun, only managing to destroy his body. I watched his soul escape. Chapter 1492. A Grand Prime's Legacy. Jianchen sucked in a deep breath. At that moment, his opinion of the Inata Grand Prime underwent an overwhelming change. The woman before him had fought the Nirvanic Immortal Exalt first. Heavily injured and locked out of the Inata Tower, she faced the immortal Emperor Taji's ambush, causing her to become even more injured. Under those situations, she actually still had the power to stand victorious against another Grand Prime of the Saints' world. Just how shocking was her strength? My injuries were just far too heavy after that battle. My soul was fading, and I was going to die in a crack of space. In my final moments, I sent a fragment of my soul into the Inata Tower to leave behind a legacy, so that my legacy would never end. Meanwhile, you are the first person who has come after 3 million years of waiting. Since you have made it here, it means that your fate is tied to me. The legacy belongs to you. It is no longer important whether you are a part of the Immortals world or not. The Inata Grand Prime's legacy. Jianchen was stunned. He was filled with disbelief. After his ties with the Immortals world had been revealed, not only did the Inata Grand Prime refuse to delve into that matter, but she was even giving her legacy to him. It had basically fallen into his lap. The Inata Grand Prime's currently in a very horrible condition. This fragment of her soul has existed here for over 3 million years. It's about to disperse, which is why she chose me as her successor. Jianchen came to an understanding. He would never believe that the Inata Grand Prime would be willing to give her legacy to a person of the Immortals world otherwise. She had done this probably because she had her own reasons and problems. The Inata Tower possesses the suppression from the Nirvanic Immortal Exalt. The fragment of my soul has been weakening every day, and has basically reached the end of the road. It's about to disperse into the surroundings, so I don't have much time left. I will formally bestow you my legacy. My only requirement is that you have to go to the Saints' world to kill the Grand Prime, Yenzun, once you are powerful enough. Are you willing? The Inata Grand Prime was staring at Jianchen with extremely bright eyes. She placed particular focus on the final sentence she spoke. Jianchen clasped his hands at the Inata Grand Prime. With a stern face he swore, "Don't worry, Senior. If I obtain your legacy, I will definitely kill the Grand Prime Yenzun and take revenge for you once I am powerful enough." The Inata Grand Prime nodded in satisfaction after Jianchen swore an oath. Her shining eyes gradually calmed down, and she mentioned, "There are 2 parts to my legacy. The first part is the Fortune Jade Seat. It possesses my cultivation technique, as well as much of my understandings toward cultivation. Not everyone can practice the cultivation technique. Only those who are fated to will be able to practice it. The second part is my extreme comprehensions of laws. I have comprehended the laws of fire, creation, and destruction to their extremes. This pearl contains my comprehensions of the laws of destruction, and it now belongs to you with the legacy. Once you fuse it with your soul, you will be able to comprehend my laws of destruction. Comprehending laws are crucial for reaching godhood. Once you have reached the peak of reciprocity, you can only reach godhood by comprehending laws. Otherwise, you will never be able to advance any further with your cultivation, and will be stuck in the origin realm forever. Comprehending 1% of the laws corresponds to deity, 10% to God, 20% to overgod, 30% to God King, 45% to Infinite Prime, and 60% to Chaotic Prime. If you comprehend 80% of a single law, you will become a Grand Prime. And if you can reach the limits, 100%. You will become a peak Grand Prime. Even across the entire Saints world, there are only a few peak Grand Primes. I have left you the complete comprehension of my laws of destruction. How much you can comprehend will depend on your own fortune. With that, a black, thumb-sized pearl slowly drifted out, stopping in front of Jianchen in the end. Immediately, the pearl began to radiate with the power of the laws of destruction. Jianchen struggled to contain his excitement as he stared at the black pearl. He slowly extended his hand toward it. The Inata Grand Prime was no longer fixated on the distant sky. Instead, she stared at Jianchen. A sliver of anticipation appeared in her eyes, as well as excitement that was deeply hidden. However, it vanished in just a moment, having been hidden away. Finally, Jianchen gently grasped the pearl that contained the power of the laws of destruction. He clearly sensed the familiar power within it, and an odd light immediately flickered through his eyes. When Jianchen grabbed the pearl, excitement appeared in the depths of the Inata Grand Prime's eyes, as well as some hidden viciousness. However, these emotions disappeared in just a single moment, and her gaze returned to being as profound as ever. Jianchen's grasp around the black pearl tightened. He did not immediately fuse the pearl into his soul. Instead, he took out a wooden box out of his space ring. Under the Inata Grand Prime's confused gaze, he slowly placed the pearl inside, before throwing the box into his space ring. The Inata Grand Prime's eyes narrowed by an indiscernible amount. She blurted out, "You need to fuse the pearl into your soul, so that you can comprehend my laws of destruction. Why don't you do that? Are you uninterested in my extreme comprehension of the laws of destruction?" Reverence filled Jianchen's eyes. He clasped his hands at the Grand Prime. "I am afraid you have misunderstood me, Senior. It's not that I don't want to comprehend Senior's laws of destruction, but I believe that comprehending the laws right now will be inconvenient. I plan on finding a quiet place to comprehend them first." "What inconvenience? In this Inata Tower, nobody can disturb you. If you go outside, it'll be even easier for people to disturb you. At the same time, comprehending laws is extremely important. If you end up disturbed during the process, forcefully wrenched from a state of comprehension, you will suffer severe injuries. They could be so bad that you might suffer a backlash from the laws, and your soul might disperse," the Inata Grand Prime said sternly. "I thank Senior for warning me. I am filled with gratitude. It's just that I've stayed for far too long in the Inata Tower already. I still have important matters to attend to outside, so I cannot stay much longer. I fear that comprehending laws will only cause further delays and end up ruining what I have to do," Jianchen calmly replied, revealing no arrogance nor humility. He stared at the Inata Grand Prime in interest. Currently, her body had become extremely faint, as if she was about to disperse. The Inata Grand Prime remained silent for quite a while before slowly replying, "I will no longer urge you if that's the case. However, please do remember to fuse the pearl with your soul as soon as possible and comprehend my laws, so that you can take revenge." With that, the illusory figure gradually dispersed under Jianchen's gaze. Jianchen slowly arrived before the statue in vigilance after the Inata Grand Prime had completely vanished. He studied the sculpture for around half a day, silently frowning. "Ziying, Qingsua, do you think that the Inata Grand Prime has really faded away? Or has she just continued hiding?" Jianchen asked the sword spirits. Only the sword spirits and him were able to hear his thought. The sword spirits did not reply immediately. Qingsua's lark-like voice rang through Jianchen's head after quite a while. "Master, she doesn't seem to be the Inata Grand Prime we remember." "Master, I also doubt whether she's the real Inata Grand Prime or not. We may not have seen the Grand Prime's appearance before, but our instincts can't be wrong." Ziying stated his thoughts as well. The entire conversation was held in Jianchen's head, so no sound was emitted at all. Jianchen calmly replied, "You really have seen through her. I must agree that I don't think that this Inata Grand Prime is the real Inata Grand Prime either. When she gave me the pearl with the laws of destruction, I saw a familiar glint of light in her eyes. Even though she hid it very well, I still managed to catch it. It was extremely similar to the light in the artifact spirit's eyes. Has she been bewitched by the spirit of the tower?" It's a pity that we can't sense the presence of that spirit in this heavenly palace of Bishing. Otherwise, we would have been able to recognize him with a single glance, no matter what he turned into," answered Ziying. "It doesn't matter whether she's the artifact's spirit or the Inata Grand Prime's disciple Taji. Anyway, I can't use her comprehension of the laws of destruction. There are definitely problems with this object," Jianchen coldly replied. A sliver of a stern light flashed through his eyes. He would not pay any attention to the story that the fake Inata Grand Prime had told him either. Jianchen glanced at the fortune jade seat before the sculpture. The seat was only the size of a millstone and 3 inches tall. It was pure white all over, and let out a gentle white glow. Jianchen could sense a calming presence from the seat, especially when he approached it. Just breathing near it had cleared up his mind and focused his attention, as if his soul had become even more consolidated at that moment. Master, fortune jade is a unique treasure of the world. It's extremely rare. And if you cultivate with just a piece of it, not only will you cultivate much faster, but will also help you comprehend laws. It has the same effects as the comprehension tea, but its effects are slightly superior. I never thought that the Inata Grand Prime owned such a great piece of it. This jade is so rare that even former master, one of the 5 great immortal exalts of the saints' world, did not possess a piece. Only the Nirvanic immortal exalt of the 5 possessed a piece, but it was not even a third of the piece of jade before you, Qing Suo said enviously, gently sighing. Her face was filled with regret, because the fortune jade seat before her was illusory. It was just a projection like the palace, and not the actual thing. Jianchen's interest was immediately piqued. However, he could only helplessly sigh. The Inata Grand Prime sure is great. This fortune jade seat is only a mere projection, yet it possesses similar effects to the actual thing. Say, if I only had the actual thing. With it, I would be able to comprehend the way of the sword far more easily. Jianchen paused for a while before continuing his questions. The fake Inata Grand Prime said that the fortune jade seat possessed the cultivation method of the Inata Grand Prime, as well as most of his understanding toward cultivation. Do you think that's true? Jianchen became much more vigilant inside, after noticing that the Inata Grand Prime was a fake. He did not believe anything that she said. Even to the Inata Grand Prime, such a large piece of fortune jade is extremely precious. It would have definitely received a lot of her attention, and might even possess a seal from the Inata Grand Prime. This piece of jade was projected along with the heavenly palace of Bishing, so the actual thing should still be in the saints' world. Only the Inata Grand Prime is able to project the heavenly palace of Bishing, and the fortune jade seat, so realistically in the Inata Tower, that this may be in the Inata Tower. But this palace is the handiwork of the Inata Grand Prime. The artifact's spirit doesn't have the power to meddle with it. Chapter 1493. The Fortune Jade Seat Master. I think the story from the fake Inata Grand Prime is true. It was extremely likely that the Inata Grand Prime was ambushed by Taji and Yinzun, after being heavily injured by the Nirvanic Immortal Exalt, which was why he died in the end. Before he died, he used his abilities to project the heavenly palace of Bishing and his fortune jade seat here, and also recorded his cultivation method in the seat, hence leaving behind his legacy. This is because rarely anyone can enter the heavenly palace of Bishing in the saints' world. If he didn't do that, it is extremely likely that his lineage would have ended then. Jianchen sank into his thoughts, and only after quite some time did he conclude. If that's the case, the legacy of the Inata Grand Prime should be true, and some of what the fake Inata Grand Prime said was probably what the Inata Grand Prime left behind. Obtaining the legacy to kill the Grand Prime Yinzun is true, but the only thing we cannot believe is the comprehension of the laws of destruction. Correct. The comprehensions are extremely likely a scheme devised by the artifact spirit. His intentions are likely to possess master. Trying to possess people as an artifact spirit is forbidden. You'll need to pay an unbelievable tremendous price, and with just the slightest carelessness, you will end up dispersing instead. Has the artifact spirit lost his mind? Ziying mocked. He was laughing at how naive the artifact spirit was. The artifact spirit sure has lived a very long time to think of things like that. He'll never succeed as long as Ziying and I are here. And hasn't the fake Inata Grand Prime realized that if she is urging Master on too much, causing doubt to form instead? Jing Sua added scornfully. We still can't confirm whether she's the artifact spirit of the Inata Tower, or a fragment of the Grand Prime's disciple's soul. However, I did happen to catch sight of something in the eyes of the fake that was very similar to the artifact spirit. The artifact spirit uses the laws of destruction as well, so I think it's most likely the artifact spirit. I never thought that the artifact spirit would be able to survive after exploding the immortal emperor's essence blood. Jianchen deduced. He then thought about the black pearl he had stored away in a wooden box within his space ring, and continued. However, even if the artifact spirit is still alive, he is extremely weak. Otherwise, it'd be impossible for him not to move against me while I was rebuilding my body. It's possible that he's so weak that he can't even deal with my soul, or he can't get through my line of defense. If that's true, we don't have to worry about the artifact spirit at all. He's even weaker than Ziying and me right now, and under the current suppression of the tower, it's basically impossible for the artifact spirit to recover. And even if he recovers some strength after countless years, Master, you will be able to kill him with a flick of your finger by then. Jing Sua snickered. She took joy in the miserable state that the artifact spirit had been reduced to. Jianchen did not think about the artifact spirit too much. Even if he knew that the artifact spirit was still alive, he was unable to find where it was hiding. After all, he had only refined the first layer of the Inata Tower. He only had a vague sense regarding the 2nd to 9th floors, not seeing them as clearly as the first floor. Regarding the pearl, it was extremely likely that it would try to take possession of Jianchen. But he did not believe it was where the artifact spirit was hiding either. My top priority is to gain strength. I don't have to fear anything once I am powerful enough, thought Jianchen. He looked at the fortune jade seat, and slowly made his way to it before sitting down on it. The seat was only a projection, but Jianchen felt like he was sitting on the real thing. A cool feeling radiated from the seat and permeated his body. Not only did he feel at ease, even the circulation of his chaotic force seemed to speed up. At the same time, a calming presence gushed into his head. At that moment, he seemed to have entered a wondrous state of mind, where he felt like everything was clearing up. The hazy, mysterious laws of the world were actually presented before him clearly, as if he could see the veins of the world. This fortune jade seat really is good. Sitting on it can indeed help people comprehend ways. It has the same effect as comprehension tea. If I cultivate here, my comprehension of the way of the sword will skyrocket, Jianchen thought. But he sighed soon after. It was a pity that the seat was not the real thing, or he could move it out and sit on it every day. At this moment, a gentle force suddenly radiated from the seat. Jianchen felt like he was a tiny boat in the vast ocean before this gentle force. Insignificant. He was forcefully pushed off the seat, as a vague voice rang through his consciousness. You are not fated. You are unable to obtain my legacy. The voice seemed masculine and feminine at the same time, both young and old. It also sounded like the cries of insects or birds. It seemed to contain all the sounds within the world, and all of them had fused together to form one voice. This is the Inata Grand Prime's voice. Jianchen's expression changed slightly as he stood before the seat. Surprise and doubt flooded his face, as he closely recalled the voice that had just appeared in his soul. A while later, a gleam of light flashed across Jianchen's eyes. He sat on the seat once again. He was not interested in the Inata Grand Prime's legacy at all since he cultivated the chaotic body. Even if the Inata Grand Prime's cultivation method was heaven-defying, it was unsuitable for him. What he really wanted was to cultivate on the seat, and borrow the powers of the fortune jade, to comprehend the way of the sword. However, the same thing happened. In less than 10 seconds after sitting down, the gentle force appeared once again and pushed him off. You are not fated. You are unable to obtain my legacy. The Inata Grand Prime's voice rang in Jianchen's head once again. It was hard to distinguish whether it was masculine or feminine, but it was impossible to discern the age of the speaker. It possessed all the sounds of the world, having become a type of law itself. It could reach the souls of people. Can't I just cultivate there? Jianchun was unsettled. He was left staring at such a great treasure before him. Yet he was unable to use it, which filled him with regret. The fortune jade seat was just a projection, but it would still bring extremely great benefits while comprehending the ways of the sword, just like comprehension tea. He did not have many comprehension tea leaves left, and each leaf only gave him an extremely limited period of time to spend comprehending the mysteries of the laws. On the other hand, the seat before him was not limited by time, allowing him to comprehend for as long as he wished. Jianchun clenched his teeth. He did not want to give up. He sat on the seat once again, but this time, he only used it as a cushion. He sealed off all his senses, preventing him from sensing the wonders within the seat, hoping he would not be kicked off. This was because the cool presence from the seat would still enter his body, as long as he sat on it. In the end, he was unable to last more than 3 seconds, to his disappointment, even when he treated it as a seat. The voice rang in his head a third time, and this time, it was as loud as a great bell. It caused his soul to shake, and was aggressive. Jianchun did not give up. He thought of all the ideas he had and sat on the seat again. Less than 10 seconds later, he was pushed off by the gentle force again, and he immediately paled. The fourth time the voice rang in his head was thunderous. It jolted his soul violently, causing it to ache as if it was been ripped apart. He suffered slight injuries to his soul. The more I try, the more powerful the voice becomes. If I want to try cultivating on the seat again, the sound will be even more terrifying. It'll be enough to heavily injure my soul, or even shake it to pieces. Looks like there's no hope for me to cultivate using this seat. Jianchun stood near the fortune jade seat with a pale face as he stared at it. He sighed inside and left in despair. At the main entrance of the tower, Jianchun raised his head and stared at the structure. When he had come here this time, he had not planned on taking the tower itself. He just wanted to find some treasures, or some of the wealth accumulated by the Anata Grand Prime, so that he could strengthen himself. What he had never thought he would obtain was the ability to refine the first layer of the tower, after defeating the artifact spirit. Though he gained nothing more than that. The Anata Grand Prime had indeed left his wealth in the Anata Tower, but it was all stored in a crack in space on the 9th floor. Jianchun was unable to retrieve them with his current strength. The Anata Tower has a total of 9 layers. I've only refined the first layer, so I can only use the basic controls of the structure. I can't even use its power, Jianchun murmured. His voice was filled with helplessness. He extended his hand and watched the tower rapidly shrink. It became the height of a finger and flew into his hand. The sword slashes still remained on the tower, but they had shrunken with the structure. Each slash shone with a bright light. The suppression of the nirvanic immortal exalt still remained. Chapter 1494. Leaving the sea of despair, Jianchun stared at the sword slashes that were still present on the surface on the Anata Tower, and said with a deep voice, I have confirmed that the artifact's spirit did not pass away from the explosion, created by the immortal emperor's essence blood. Since he's still around, I can't break the seal on the tower, even if I had the ability to. Once the suppression from the seal is gone, the artifact's spirit will be able to recover rapidly, surpassing my own growth rate. Jianchun removed the wooden box with the black pearl from his space ring after some silence. With a thought, he placed the wooden box inside the Anata Tower. He felt like leaving it in the Anata Tower was safer, and worried that something might happen someday if he carried it with him. He still did not understand the use of the pearl. Possession was only one of his, and the sword spirit's guesses. At the same time, he did not want to test the effects of the pearl either. He understood that testing them would only be detrimental. Thus, testing it was pointless. I may not be able to use the power of the Anata Tower right now, but it's a fated god artifact of the Anata Grand Prime after all. It's created from rare items of the world. Even if it can't display any powers at all, just the weight of the tower is probably enough to flatten a planet. Jianchun's lips gradually curled into a smile, as he stared at the finger-sized tower in the center of his hand. He did not obtain what he wanted from this journey, which filled him with some pity, but he felt like it was worth the trip just for the Inata Tower. Even if the Inata Tower had no special abilities, just the weight of it would not be something a receival expert could withstand. Jian Chun had refined the first layer, hence gaining access to the basic controls, which was why it was as light as a feather in his hands. However, once it left his side, it would become extremely heavy. He had no doubt that the tower could crush receival experts to death. With a thought, the tower immediately disappeared from Jian Chen's hand. An imprint that seemed the same as the Inata Tower appeared in the center of Jian Chen's hand. It was exquisitely designed and seemed like a birthmark. He originally could have fused it into his soul, but Jian Chen did not plan on doing that before he had completely refined it. The risks were just too great. Jian Chen reluctantly glanced at the flat region one last time before leaving. The way back was also extremely difficult. Jian Chen had no idea how long he had been wandering in the endless mist, let alone the number of times he had been teleported away. In the end, he found his way out by luck, leaving the disorienting Sea of Despair. The endless mist within the Sea of Despair did not vanish with the disappearance of the Inata Tower. It churned just like before. Jian Chen did not remain outside the Sea of Despair for long. He immediately shot into the sky, leaving the sea realm in just a single moment. With a huge splash, he emerged from the sea and rushed into the blue sky. He then transformed into a violet streak of light and instantly flew away, moving extremely quickly. Flame City was bustling. All the streets and alleyways were filled with people and activities. Carriages filled with goods rolled down the wide streets as burly mercenaries accompanied the vehicles in orderly fashions, coming in and out of the city. Even though mercenaries of various places had gathered in the city, causing it to become a mixture of strong and weak, there had never been any cases of violence within the city. The current Flame City was no longer as simple as the headquarters of the Flame Mercenaries. From a certain aspect, it had already replaced Mercenary City, becoming a holy land to all mercenaries on the Tianyuan continent. Although Flame City could not compare to the past Mercenary City in terms of heritage, that did not affect its supreme status among the mercenaries of the continent. This was because the city lord of the city was the greatest human expert, Jian Chen. He was a supreme existence on the Tianyuan continent, fully deserving the title of sovereign. The vice city lord, Bai Lian, had become a famed figure on the Tianyuan continent long ago as well. Even the magical beasts, the 100 races and the sea race had heard rumors about her. A violet streak of light tore through the sky above the city. It vanished in the blink of an eye, having arrived in the city lord's estate already. The violet light moved just too quickly and soundlessly. Coupled with how it was daytime, there were very few experts who sensed the arrival of the light in the city. Bai Hai snapped open his eyes as he cultivated in a secret room. A smear of pride appeared on his face, and he murmured, "After having gone missing for around a dozen years, my grandsons finally returned. Throughout these years, basically everyone in the world has been discussing whether a Class 8 Radiant Saint Master can revive Saint weapons or not. I'm curious as well, but I can finally find out." Bai Hai stood up and left the room with a smile. Brothers returned. Bai Lian and Yu sensed Jian Chen's return in a moment as they strolled through the gardens. They were immediately pleasantly surprised, and in a flash they left. They hurried over as quickly as they could. It had been around a dozen years since Jian Chen had last appeared. Back when he had become a Class 8 Radiant Saint Master, he completely vanished after taking the large pile of saint weapons. He faded out of sight. He was only seen by Tai Ta, the sea goddess, and the other few Origin Realm experts during the second invasion from the world of Forsaken Saints. At the same time, Du Gufeng, Yin Zheng, Signorin, Jietai, and other members of the upper echelon all put down what they were handling at the time and immediately rushed to the main discussion hall to meet Jian Chen. Jian Chen did not sit on the city lord's throne within the hall, and instead stood silently in the center of the room. He did not radiate a presence at all, making him seem like an ordinary person. 2 rows of elite soldiers kneeled to his left and right in black armor. Every single one of them was no weaker than a heaven saint master. 2 of them were saint rulers. Chapter 1495. Secret of the saint weapons. During this past era of peace, saint rulers were hermit experts who rarely appeared before people even after centuries. Yet, there were 2 saint rulers, wearing armor forged from tungsten alloy, kneeling respectfully like guards. They did not even dare to breathe too loudly. If this had happened in the past, it would have been enough to shock countless people. Even right now, while the Tianyuan continent faced the threat of the foreign world, saint rulers still possessed an extraordinary status after both saint kings and saint emperors had all emerged. To get a saint ruler to kneel willingly was virtually impossible. Even saint emperors would not be able to achieve such a feat, however. Jianchen now possessed enough prestige for saint rulers to kneel for him. Let alone saint rulers, even a few saint kings, who admired him, could not help but bend their prideful legs and yield to Jianchen. This was not because they had no pride. Rather, what they felt was admiration for the powerful. Not to mention the fact that Jianchen was the only human to have surpassed Saint Emperor since Mo Tianyin. Yang Lai, Gui Haidao, and Feng Xiaotian could not be considered people of the Tianyuan continent, and when they had come down from the saint's world, their cultivation had fallen to Saint Emperor as well, unable to recover even now. As a result, the 3 of them could only be considered half an origin realm expert. They were not true origin realm experts. You can all rise, Jianchen gently said to the 2 rows of people. His gaze was filled with mixed emotions. He could not help but think of a moment in the past, when he had been forced to remain in Mercenary City, because of the saint rulers who were hunting him down. At that time, saint rulers were indomitable existences in his eyes. He did not even have the power to fight back or flee before them. Yet now, he had become an existence that saint rulers would admire. This filled him with amazement. Yes, sir. The 2 rows of guards courteously replied together. Only then did they slowly rise and step to the side while breathing quietly. The 2 saint rulers would glance at Jianchen from time to time, mad devotion filling their faces. The 2 of them were not originally a part of the Flame Mercenaries, but many people had joined over the past dozen years, due to their admiration for Jianchen. They then become the guards of the discussion hall in the city lord's estate. To them, being able to hold such a position was a great honor. They viewed the job with pride. This was because this hall was the place where the fate of the entire Flame Mercenaries could be determined, a place that could influence the entire Tianyuan continent. This was because the important meetings of the Flame Mercenaries were all held in the discussion hall. Every guard was overwhelmed by indescribably joy when they saw Jianchen. Jianchen's name had already reached their ears long ago. They had only seen his sculpture, and never him in the flesh. Not only did they manage to see him today with their own eyes, but they were able to interact with him at such a close range. Every single one of them was filled with great excitement. Ha ha ha, great-grandson, you went missing for over a dozen years. If you still hadn't returned, the 2 girls would have sent people across the entire continent to search for you. With a clear chuckle, Bai Hai walked in from outside with his 2 hands behind his back. He seemed to be taking a casual stroll, but he crossed several hundred meters with each step. He arrived inside the hall with just a few steps. Brother, you finally returned. Jianchen. As soon as Bai Hai had entered the discussion hall, Bai Lian and Yu Yu's joyful voices rang out. The 2 girls charged in as quickly as they could. They were ecstatic. Afterward, Yin Zheng, Seniorin, Wang Yifeng, Du Gafeng, Jetta Tai, and a few other members of the upper echelon hurried over from everywhere. They all clasped their hands to Jianchen before quietly standing to a side. Jianchen also smiled when he saw these people. His smile was filled with warmth. My dear great-grandson, how's the revival of the saint weapons been? The entire world's been discussing this for the past decade. There's even quite a few old and powerful people who've come to ask for news, but they've all left disappointed in the end. I'm your great-grandfather after all. Even if you want to hide this from the entire world, you still have to tell me and satisfy me curiosity. Bai Hai chuckled. As Jianchen Sr., He obviously did not need to behave politely and carefully when speaking to Jian Chen. Brother, where have been for the past decade? You've made me and sister Yu worry so much. Bai Lian grumbled while clinging to one of Jian Chen's arms. Her voice was filled with blame and satisfaction. Yu stood to one side as she silently stared at Jian Chen. She smiled, and in her gentle eyes tears flashed. Although it had been over a decade, even the weakest of the people present, Bai Lian, was a saint ruler. They all possessed lifespans of several millennia, so such a short amount of time was not enough to leave any marks on them. Everyone looked the same as before, including Bai Lian and Yu. Aside from everyone being more mature and steady-minded, there were no significant changes. Jian Chen greeted everyone and asked how they were doing before telling them about the flaw regarding the revival of saint weapons. He could sense that it would not be long until the third battle against the world of forsaken saints, so there was no longer any need to hide the flaw anymore. Telling everyone would instead boost their confidence and morale. Everyone in the discussion hall fell silent when they learned about the flaw of the revived saint weapons. Even Bai Hai silently frowned. On the Tianyuan continent, many people left behind saint weapons when they passed away. Aside from helping their clansmen, many people did due to the slightest possibility of being revived. Even though the chances were insignificant, there were still many people who left behind their saint weapons without any hesitation, just to gamble on a second life. However, what none of them could have known was that they would be turned into mindless puppets after being revived, and that they would be controlled by the person who had revived them. If all of them had learned that this would be the outcome of their second life, would there have been so many people willing to leave behind their saint weapons to be controlled as puppets? When experts at the 9th heavenly layer did not leave behind their saint weapons, they made the choice to destroy them in their final moments of life. After all, not everyone had clans. There were many independent cultivators as well. Sigh. I never thought that the revived saint weapons would turn out like this. I can imagine that there will be fewer and fewer saint weapons on the Tianyuan continent in the future, if this matter makes it out to the public. Bai Hai sighed after quite a long while. His emotions were extremely mixed. Chapter 1496. A Young Death in Longevity Valley. If we can't make it through the invasion of the foreign world, would there even be a future? In my opinion, the fact that revived saint weapons have been reduced to puppets is not necessarily a bad thing under these circumstances. Their strength may have decreased, but they also possess advantages that we don't. They can't feel pain or fear. They know nothing even before death. These suicide soldier-like puppets will be of unimaginably great uses in a few special situations. And over the past few years, Yang Lai, Feng Xiaotian, and Guihai Dao have been passing on formations to all the Saint Emperors of the 4 races. If Saint Emperors use these formation, they can trap Origin Realm experts, or gain far more strength than what they originally possessed by paying a certain price. These formations are more than suitable for these Saint Emperor puppets, said De Gufeng. He was emotionless and spoke rather coldly, as if his determined face had never smiled before. Bai Hai's eyes immediately lit up because of what De Gufeng said. He added, "You're right. If Saint Emperors burn their lives to use the powerful formations, they won't be able to surpass the peak of Saint Emperor. But some powerful existences can reach the peak of Saint Emperor. Since these puppets have no self-awareness, their former lives will be humiliated if they continue like this, but they will be able to shine one last time in the next battle against the foreign world, protecting our home with the current generation." Jian Chen silently nodded. He sank into his thoughts. He had known long ago that Yang Lai, Guihai Dao, and Feng Xiaotian were responsible for passing on a few formations to the Saint Emperors, as well as personally guiding them through the usages of the various formations. Jian Chen also knew a few formations from higher worlds. He had learned all these sword formations from the sword spirits, so even though they were the weakest from the higher realms, they were still much more powerful than the formations that Feng Xiaotian and the others knew. Casting these formations was extremely difficult, and even Jian Chen might not possess the power to use them. This was not only due to his lack of strength, but also because the sword formations were just far too profound. He needed some time to completely understand them. Looks like I should go check on great-grandfather Yang Lai and learn the formations from him, so that these puppets can use them, Jianshan thought. He then dismissed everyone from the discussion hall. Only Bai Hai, Bai Lian, Yu Yu, and Duge Feng remained. He then took out the saint artifact and let out Bai Yuntian, who was cultivating inside. Bai Yuntian had spent over a decade in the artifact space cultivating. She improved at an otherworldly rate. Although it was nowhere near as fast as Jianshan's cultivation rate, she would be considered as a rare genius across the entire continent. She had already reached the peak of the 6th class, and was currently making preparations to reach the 7th class. Jianshan failed to see newbies, Ming Dong, or Little Fatty in the discussion hall. However, he did not ask about them. Instead, he expanded the senses of his soul, enveloping the entire city in a single moment. He extended his senses deep underground to the secret rooms, but failed to find them there. So he continued to spread his soul even further without any hesitation, enveloping the entire continent. His soul had even reached into the vast ocean. The wind whistled and waves roared in the ocean. Huge waves that were several dozen meters tall would be kicked up from time to time. A huge sea beast currently rode through the waves. Its body was extremely stable and would not tremble at all no matter how violent the waves were. A young man in golden robes lay on the huge sea beast. He held a jug of alcohol, as he constantly took a sip from it in satisfaction. 2 burly women, who seemed to be in their 20s, knelt beside him, carefully massaging his legs and back while full of polite fear. The 2 women did not possess striking appearances. Even though they behaved fearfully before the golden-robed young man, their fear was still not enough to conceal their toughness. The powerful presence that belonged to saint rulers leaked out from them. The 2 women were clearly Class 7 magical beasts that had assumed human form. Now this is life. I can go wherever I want. It's no longer like the past where I couldn't enter the territory of humans and always needed to keep myself hidden, avoiding that old snake on the beast god continent with my life hanging on a line all the time. I came close to death so many times after going to the sea realm with Jianshan, almost making it impossible for me to see the light of day ever again. The young man sipped his alcohol as he muttered to himself. Reminiscence flooded his face, along with some longing. He was newbies, but I gotta say that the days I spent with Jianshan are really much more interesting than anything I ever did before. In just a few short decades, I went from being a Class 7 magical beast to being a Class 9. This was all because I made an extremely smart decision in the past. If I had chosen to keep hiding in that cave, I probably wouldn't have reached the 8th class yet, Newbie said proudly before glancing at the 2 women beside him. He sniggered. Do the 2 of you know who Jianshan, who I, the great newbies, mentioned is? We know. Of course we know. Even we have heard of Sovereign Jianshan's great name. We're filled with admiration for him. It's just that we're filled with regret over how we have never caught a glimpse of him, the 2 burly women added. Their eyes were filled with deep admiration. Since you've become my servants, I'll obviously fulfill that small wish of yours. You will naturally get a chance to catch a glimpse of my brother in the future, Newbies said proudly. However, a vague voice rang in his head as soon as he finished speaking. Newbies, come to Flame City immediately. Newbies was stunned. The next moment his eyes shone brightly. Without any hesitation, he immediately stood up and ripped open space, creating a space gate. You 2 go back to the island and wait there. Newbies spoke the moment he passed through the space gate. Not only had Jianshan found Newbies with his soul, but he had also found Ming Dong and Little Fatty. However, his emotions became sorrowful. Currently, the 2 of them were in Longevity Valley. The entire place was filled with sorrow, and all the villagers there were wearing white. Their faces were filled with anguish. Chapter 1497. A heavy tower. Jianshan could see everything happening in Longevity Valley with his soul. Filled with sorrow, the place made Jianshan fall silent. At that moment, Jianshan could not help but feel sad as anguish filled his face. Jianshan stood quietly in the discussion hall. Although he was in Flame City, his mind was in Longevity Valley, which was over 1,000,000 kilometers away. He sighed in the end. Outside Flame City, a patch of space suddenly began to violently distort. Soon afterward, it ripped open, and a multicolored space gate appeared. Newbies emerged leisurely from the gate, and with a flash, he disappeared as if he had teleported away. In 5 seconds, Newbies appeared within the city lord's estate. He swaggered toward the central discussion hall while the guards that passed him all bowed politely to him. Jianchen, you finally returned after vanishing for over a decade. Sigh. I'm more used to spending time with you. It really has been hard to get accustomed to life without you. Newbies chuckled aloud as soon as he entered the discussion hall. He felt happy from the bottom of his heart that Jianchen had returned, because it was just like what he had said. The days he spent with Jianchen were the most interesting times of his life. They had always been filled with hair-raising moments. Now that everything had slowed down, Newbies found it rather hard to adapt to his new life, since he loved his lifestyle from before. Jianchen also suppressed his sorrow due to Newbies' return. His emotions were back to their usual calm very soon. He glanced over the remaining people in the discussion hall and said, I've called you all here today to see whether you are fated to obtain a huge fortune or not. Don't resist. I will send you into another world. With that, a finger-sized tower appeared in the center of Jianchen's palm. It rapidly expanded under Jianchen's control, becoming over 10 meters tall in the blink of an eye. Fortunately, the hall was over 20 meters tall, so it was able to hold the tower without it hitting the ceiling. Since Jianchen had not completely refined the Inata Tower, he could not use many of the tower's abilities. He was obviously unable to get the tower to hover in the air, so he could only place it on the ground. Bang! As soon as the damaged Inata Tower touched the ground, it produced a heavy sound while the ground began to violently shake. Not only did the shaking spread across the entire city, but it even expanded beyond the city at a rapid rate. In the end, it reached several 100,000 kilometers away, causing a rare earthquake across a small portion of the continent. The discussion hall became filled with cracks at that moment. Even though the entire hall had been imbued with a shred of Xiao Jin's force, making it extremely tough where not even Saint Kings could damage it, it seemed extremely fragile when touched by the Inata Tower. When the Inata Tower touched the ground, it was not as simple as a tremble and an earthquake. The ground underneath the tower rapidly sank, causing the tower to sink into the ground as well. The Inata Tower had crushed the ground with just its weight, sinking at an extremely rapid pace. In just a second, basically the entire tower had been buried. Only a third of it was still present. Jianchen immediately smacked his head at this sight. He had forgotten that the Inata Tower could not leave his hand. The tower was as light as a feather when he carried it, but if it left his hand, nothing could hold back its weight. Even without using any power from the tower, he could probably pierce half a planet just by using its weight. Without any hesitation, Jianchen arrived above the tower that was about to disappear in a flash. He gently placed his hand on its tip. The moment Jianchen's hand touched the tower, it immediately came to a stop before rapidly shrinking. In just a few seconds, the tower shrank back to the size of a finger. It stood in Jianchen's hand, leaving behind a pit over 10 meters deep. Brother, look at you. You've destroyed the discussion hall. Just what is this treasure? Bai Lian grumbled, but her eyes were fixated on the tower in Jianchen's hand. Curiosity poured out of her eyes. Jianchen bitterly smiled as he looked at the destroyed discussion hall. This treasure's too heavy. I can't place it down here. Looks like we need to find another place. Jianchen left Flame City with them, searching for a place tough enough to set down the tower. There would naturally be people in the city who would fix the damaged discussion hall. Jianchen did not pay any attention to the powerful earthquake either. There was a mountain range close to Flame City. The mountain range was originally a mine for tungsten alloy, and had once received attention from people across the continent. However, since the metallic spirit in the mine had matured and left as Xiao Jin, the place had completely lost its value. It had been reduced to an ordinary mountain range without any tungsten alloy left. There was a deep valley in the depths of the mountain range. Very few people knew about its existence. Even after being reduced to a mountain range, the bottom of the valley was not soft. It was extremely tough. At this moment Jian Chun, Bai Yintian, Bai Hai, Bai Lian, Yu Dugafeng, and newbies stood at the bottom of the valley. Before them stood a tower that was 3,000 meters tall. It was covered with sword slashes, and each slash flickered brightly, giving off a suffocating sword chi. A huge barrier stood above the tower, enveloping the entire mountain range, and suppressing the tower's existence. It sure is problematic when I have to carry this tower with me. Sigh. If only the artifact spirit was here. Jian Chun felt rather helpless as he stared at the tower. Although he had found a place to set down the tower, he needed to make the tower huge, so that its large surface area could disperse its weight. That was the only way to ensure that the tower would not sink into the ground. Chapter 1498. Fortune Selection. Newbies by Hai, Dugafeng, Yu, and Bai Lian all stood sternly before the Inata Tower. The tower was currently damaged. Its main entrance had essentially caved in. It seemed like a ruined tower, but they could feel an invisible pressure from it as they stood there. They experienced intense emotions due to the feeling. They felt like tiny ants facing the vast heavens. They were the tiny ants, while the damaged tower was the vast heavens. Jian Chun, where do you find this treasure? It's clearly ruined, yet I still feel insignificant from the depths of my soul as I stand before it. And those slashes on the tower. Just a single glance makes me the great newbies frightened. I'm a powerful class 9 magical beast, equivalent to human saint emperors. I stand on the very apex in this world, yet just a glance frightens me. I can't imagine just how extraordinary this tower is, said newbies. He glanced at the sword slashes on the tower from time to time with a stern expression. Jian Chun raised his head and looked at the tower. He smiled. This tower really is extraordinary. Come on, let's go inside. There's a fortuitous encounter waiting inside. Whether you can obtain it or not will be up to fate. Jian Chun did not give an in-depth explanation regarding the tower. He did not even mention the name. It was not because he did not trust them, but because the Inata Tower was connected to the Inata Grand Prime's legacy. If this piece of news was exposed to the Saints' world, they would suffer a disaster. Even though the legacy of the Inata Grand Prime could not be given to everyone, just the tower itself was enough to kick up a storm of blood in the Saints' world. After all, the tower was the famed treasure of the Inata Grand Prime. Jian Chun believed that it was no weaker than the Azulite swords when they were in their prime. Even peak Grand Primes would emerge to fight over such a powerful god artifact. Jian Chun took everyone to the 9th floor. When they saw the grand mountainous projection of the heavenly palace of Bisheng, they were all stunned. Not only was the palace far greater than any divine hall they had ever seen in their lives, but they sensed an indescribable feeling rolling off the palace as well. This was a feeling created by the power of laws. The projection of the palace had also been imbued with laws. This divine hall's clearly illusory, but when I step on it, it's no different than solid land. It's the exact same feeling. This is not something that Saint Emperors can do. Only those who have surpassed Saint Emperor can achieve this. Bai Hai sighed in surprise. He closely examined the palace and immediately felt shocked. He realized through his observations that even if he used his full strength, he might not even be able to destroy the projection. That was not all that he noticed either. Even the space in the damaged tower was countless times tougher than any space on the Tianyuan continent. Even if peak Saint Emperors struck out as hard as they could, they would not even be able to make the space around the palace ripple at all. This tower is very extraordinary. It's crafted by a peak origin realm expert at the very least. And looking at how realistic the projection of the palace is, not even peak origin realm experts may necessarily possess the power to create something like this. It's extremely likely to be the treasure of an expert beyond the origin realm. Bai Hai sighed in shock. However, he was also very curious as to where Jian Chun had found such a powerful tower. The group of people passed through the illusory palace. Along the way, everyone aside from Jian Chun kept looking around, observing the landscape around the hall. The palace was illusory, meaning it was possible to see outside the palace. But that was only a tiny portion of what they were looking at. Most of the palace was hazy, as if it had been enshrouded by mist. It was not completely transparent, but it was not enough to stop everyone's curiosity. Finally, Jianchun brought everyone before the fortune jade seat. He pointed at the round piece of jade and said, "The fortuitous encounter I mentioned is this seat. Try sitting on it one after another to see if any of you are fated to obtain it." Everyone examined the round piece of jade, and all felt doubtful. Finally, Bai Lian voiced her doubts. "Just what kind of fortuitous encounter is this, brother? Why are you making it seem so mysterious?" Jianchun immediately became stern. He said in a serious voice, "Don't ask. It's best if you don't learn too much about this place. I know you would never purposefully mention it to others, but I'm afraid that there will be experts in the future who will be able to use various abilities to learn about this place from you. That will turn out to be a disaster for us all." Every single one of them were shocked by Jianchun's response. They all stared at Jianchun in disbelief. They were stunned by what he said, but they also learned that this was quite a significant place. After some discussion, they finally decided that Bai Yuntian would sit on the seat first. This was because only Bai Yuntian had that right out of all of them. Bai Yuntian attempted to push this idea away, but she ended up agreeing due to no other choice. She was the first person to sit on the seat. The moment Bai Yuntian sat on the jade seat, Jianchun stared at her fixedly. He felt rather nervous and conflicted inside. He wished that she could obtain the Anata Grand Prime's legacy, and also wished the exact opposite at the same time. He knew that once Bai Yuntian received the legacy, she would embark on a completely different path. She would definitely experience a lot of danger and slaughter. In other words, she would never be able to pass her days peacefully ever again. He wished that his mother could become powerful, able to live forever, and have the ability to keep herself safe when she came across dangers. But he also wished that she could live her life easily, unwilling for her to go through a lot of killing. Obtaining the legacy would mean that she would lose these peaceful days. Chapter 1499. Fated to be with nobody. A few seconds finally passed while Jianchun nervously watched. He sensed the familiar and powerful force surge out of the fortune jade seat and push Bai Yuntian off. Jianchun obviously knew that Bai Yuntian was not fated to learn the Anata Grand Prime's legacy after he was unable to accept it after his own attempts. As he sighed in relief, he also felt slightly depressed. Bai Yuntian opened her eyes and immediately looked around after having been pushed off the fortune jade seat. Her gaze was filled with caution, but when she discovered that there was no one else present apart from Jianchun's group, she became surprised and was filled with doubt. "Xiang'er, I think I just heard someone talk," Bai Yuntian said to Jianchun. Jianchun smiled. "Mother, that was the voice of a peerless senior, and was left behind several years ago. In reality, this senior has already been dead for many years, but before he passed away, he left behind his legacy in the fortune jade seat. Those who are not fated to obtain it cannot gain it." Bai Yuntian nodded. She then turned to Bai Hai. "Great-grandfather, you should try too to see if you can obtain this senior's legacy." Bai Hai laughed and glanced at Bai Yuntian, Jianchun, and Bai Lian tenderly. His gaze was filled with the affection of a senior to his juniors. He said, "How can I use up a chance at a peerless senior's legacy before you juniors? Great-grandson Jianchun's talent is supreme, and he cultivates at a shocking speed. You've already become the greatest expert among the humans, so I think this legacy doesn't catch your eye. Lianer, come. You try first to see if you're fated with this peerless senior." "Great-grandfather, Sister Yu is brother's fiancée. She should go first. If she doesn't go, how can I go?" Bai Lian pouted and replied in dissatisfaction. Yu wore a white dress as she stood there with a straight back. She gently smiled, making her seem noble and graceful. She said with a gentle voice, "Sister Bai Lian, I practice the cultivation method of Fairy Hao Yu. It may not necessarily be as great as this senior, but it's still extraordinary. Only your cultivation method is rather ordinary. So why don't you go first?" This, Bai Lian hesitated. Inside, she hoped that Yu could obtain the senior's cultivation method instead. This was not only because of how close they were, But more importantly, Yu Yu was her brother's fiancé, and a chance at this legacy came from her brother. Yu Yu was obviously supposed to attempt to obtain the legacy before her. When Jianchen saw Bai Lian hesitate, he said, "Lianer, you go try. This senior's legacy isn't that easy to obtain. It doesn't matter who goes first because it's likely that no one here will obtain it." "All right, I'll go sit there since you've said so yourself." Bai Lian smiled sweetly and sat on the fortune jade seat. A few seconds later, the powerful and gentle force appeared once again, pushing Bai Lian off. Bai Lian opened her eyes and said with some helplessness, "Brother, I'm also not fated with that senior. But I just wonder whether this senior is a human or a beast, or feminine or masculine. Why does this senior's voice sound so odd? It sounds like everything. This is a voice that contains all the sounds of the world, so you'll hear whatever you think it is," Jianchen explained with a smile. His gaze possessed some adoration. Afterward, Bai Hai Dugafeng and newbies all sat on the fortune jade seat, but they suffered the same outcome as everyone else. None of them possessed the right to obtain the Anata Grand Prime's legacy. In the end, Jianchen got Yu Yu to try as well, but she failed to obtain the Anata Grand Prime's recognition. Even though Jianchen had expected this long ago, he still found it difficult to not sigh when reality was placed before him. An 80% comprehension of laws is enough for you to become a Grand Prime, yet the Anata Grand Prime has comprehended the laws of fire, creation, and destruction to 100%. The Sword Spirits once said that the Anata Grand Prime was so powerful that he ranked within the top 3 in the Saints' world. Only the greatest expert of the Saints' world, the Grand Prime of the Warring Gods, who even stood above the Nirvanic Immortal Exalt, could overpower the Anata Grand Prime. The legacy of such an impressive expert obviously will not be easy to obtain. Perhaps only people fulfilling certain aspects can obtain it, Jianchen thought before bringing everyone outside the tower. Jianchen pressed his hand against the tower outside and used his mind to shrink it back into the size of a thumb, which then disappeared into his palm. He then turned to everyone and said, "You leave first. I have to go to Longevity Valley immediately. Little Fatty's father has passed away. Jianchen, let me come with you." Yu Yu gently glanced at Jianchen. Jianchen nodded. Inside, he always felt indebted to Yu Yu. There were many princesses of the Jessen Kingdom who had married and given birth long ago. Some of the princesses even had grandchildren. Only she was still engaged. Newbies opened his mouth. He originally planned on going with Jianchen, but after hearing what Yu Yu said, he immediately dismissed the thought. He sniggered. "Jianchen, I'll go play around with the 2 female servants I just accepted, so I'll be leaving first." With that, newbies left. Bai Lian Dugafeng and Bai Hai all returned to Flame City after bidding farewell to Jianchen. Bai Yuntian returned to the artifact space to cultivate. In the blink of an eye, only Jianchen and Yu Yu were left at the bottom of the valley. "Yuer, let's go." "Yes." A streak of violet light rushed into the sky from the bottom of the valley. It shot through the air like a bolt of lightning, disappearing into the horizon. It moved extremely quick. Within the dazzling light was a 20-meter-long sword. Jianchen currently held Yu Yu by her thin waist to stabilize her and prevent her from falling off. The Ziying sword flew very fast, causing the surrounding landscape to be reduced to a blur, impossible to see with the naked eye. However, even if the landscape was visible, Yu Yu would not have been interested in appreciating it. She currently stood with her eyes closed and a happy smile on her face, gently resting her head against Jianchen's chest. This was a time when only the 2 of them were present. These were the best and sweetest moments to Yu Yu. After over a decade of painful waiting, she had finally obtained a chance to be with Jianchen. Chapter 1500. Xiaomi's funeral. Jianchen gently placed his arm around Yu Yu as he sniffed her faint body fragrance. He smoothly said, "It's been tough for you over the past few years, Yuer. Do you blame me for making you wait so long?" Yu Yu raised her head. Her limpid eyes looked at Jianchen full of love and gentleness. She softly said, "Jianchen, I've never blamed you because I know it's been very difficult for you too. You can even describe every single day after leaving Kargath Academy like that. You must have sacrificed a lot throughout all those years to attain what you have right now, which might have even come close to costing your life. I'm your fiancé, yet I can only watch you fight for your life without providing any assistance at all. Is there still anything for me to complain about? Jianchen, did you know that I've always taken pride in being able to become your wife since I'm your fiancé? You're extremely impressive and powerful. You possess unprecedented cultivation talent. Who knows how many beauties in the world would offer their hearts to you? I'm extremely glad that father proposed this marriage between the two of us. Yu looked at Jianchen in a daze. Not only was her voice emotional, but it was extremely gentle as well. She then gently wrapped around Jianchen with both her arms. She pressed her entire body against Jianchen and said, Jianchen, do you still remember how you promised that you'd marry me? Have you ever forgotten about it? Of course I remember. How could I forget that? It's just that I have other women aside from you, Yuer. Jianchen gently replied. He seemed to think of something, and his feelings became mixed. Yu smiled gently. Jianchen, your father has 4 wives. Do you know how many my father has? Jianchen shook his head. Although he belonged to the Jessen kingdom, and was an imperial protector there, he did not know anything about the imperial family. He had no idea how many princesses or princes the kingdom had. Seeing how unsure Jianchen was, Yu broke into a giggle. She made fun of him. So much for being an imperial protector. You don't even know this. Then let me tell you. My father has a total of 28 consorts, with my mother being one of them. Yu became gloomy as soon as she mentioned her own mother. She had passed away soon after Yu was born. If not for pictures of her, Yu would not have known what she looked like. Are there any authoritative men who don't have many wives? Your father's like that, and so is mine. On the other hand, you are more outstanding than both your own father and mine. Who knows how many women are willing to offer themselves to you? I came to an understanding long ago that you're not someone a single woman can claim to herself. So I don't mind how many women you take. Yu continued. She spoke very gently, and with great consideration. What if I told you I already have a child? Jianchen said shamefully. Even his parents did not know about Shangguan Aojian. Yu was the first person he had told. Yu gently trembled. She stared at Jianchen in shock and only responded with a rather trembling voice after a momentary pause. Jianchen, is that true? It's true. It's been over a decade since I've seen him now. He should be all grown up. Jianchen Genie sighed. He could not help but think of Shangguan Aojian on Three Saint Island, and felt some more shame as well. This was because he knew he had not been a good father. He rarely spent any time by Shangguan Aojian's side. He could probably count the number of days he had been with him on his fingers. I'll go to Three Saint Island after this, and stay there until the world of Forsaken Saints decides to invade, Jianchen thought. However, he planned on visiting the Huang family, as well, since Huang Wan was there. I may not know who she is, but I believe she's someone extraordinary. Jianchen, if the chance arises, you have to go take me to see your child, okay? Yi said. Even though her gentle voice was very calm and composed, Jianchen could still sense some sadness in it. Jianchen nodded. The two of them remained silent for the rest of the journey. Even though Longevity Valley was 1,000,000 kilometers away from Flame City, he crossed this huge distance very quickly on the Ziying sword. Longevity Valley was located on the outskirts of the Cross Mountains. Jianchen stopped close to the valley before making his way over with Yu on foot. Longevity Valley still seemed the same even after so many years, without any changes whatsoever. Any weeds that grew were immediately removed by the villagers. The valley was usually filled with a calm peace, as if it was an otherworldly haven. However, the entire valley was covered by white cloth now. Every household had hung a piece of snow-white cloth on their house according to the local traditions. The bitter fragrance of white flowers was present as well. The entire valley had sunk deep into sorrow. Jianchen and Yu entered the village. They found little Fatty mourning his father in the center of the village. He knelt before a coffin and did not move at all, appearing like a statue. His mother sat on the ground with red, swollen eyes. Her face was filled with sadness, and she was dejected, as if she had lost her soul altogether. Jianchen stared at the coffin in grief. His feelings had also grown heavy when he entered the valley. He knew that the person lying in the coffin was Uncle Xiaomi, the person who had once saved his life. Since Xiaomi had an incomplete soul, he could never break through to Saint Ruler, and only possessed a lifespan of 1,000 years. 1,000 years had passed for him now, and he had reached the end of his life. He would still pass away even if he consumed many 10,000-year-old, 100,000-year-old, or million-year-old heavenly resources. These heavenly resources could completely change someone's constitution, allowing a cripple to become a genius in an extremely short amount of time. They could even revive people near death. As long as there was a heartbeat, then they could recover extremely quickly. However, no matter how amazing heavenly resources were, they could not give someone another soul. Jianchen had not come across a heavenly resource that could give a person a second soul in the Xianhuang microcosm. Quite a few villagers in the surroundings recognized Jianchen, and all greeted him. Since Xiaomi passed away recently, all the villagers were in horrible spirits. None of them wanted to talk much, so they all just looked at him and nodded to acknowledge his presence. Jianchen passed through the crowd and directly appeared before Xiaomi's coffin. He stared at it silently for quite a while before giving it a deep bow. He was filled with an indescribable bitterness. He was a Class 9 Radiant Saint Master. Not only could he revive saint weapons, but he could revive dead people as well, as long as their souls remained. Jianchen could even revive fallen saint emperors, but he was unable to do anything about Xiaomi's death. Even with Jianchen's abilities as a Class 9 Radiant Saint Master, he could not make up for the lacking aspects of Xiaomi's soul. Jianchen could not complete it for him. Chapter 1501. A Successor Found 1. Longevity Valley was especially busy, but not bustling due to joy or cheers. Instead, this was a day when the valley had gathered the largest number of people in the past few centuries, or millennia. Not only had all the villagers in the valley come out to send off Xiaomi, but quite a few outsiders had come as well. Aside from Jianchen and Mingdong, there was the vice-sect master of the Bloodsword sect, the 4 protectors, and the various elders. Their strongest member, Jiang Wang, had become a saint emperor due to Jianchen's assistance over a decade ago, while the rest were saint rulers or saint kings. The people from the Bloodsword sect all wore long, red robes that seemed to be dyed with blood. They worked hard to conceal their baleful force, so that they could appear more ordinary, having arrived in Longevity Valley, while maintaining a low profile. They all respectfully bowed to Jianchen before quietly standing behind him. They all gazed at Xiaomi's coffin with mixed emotions. There was sorrow, regret, and helplessness among their gentle sighs. Before Jianchen had become the sect master of the Bloodsword sect, the position had always been held by Houston. Ever since Houston had retired to Longevity Valley 1,000 years ago and stopped participating in the struggles of the continent, the Bloodsword sect had been managed by Xiaomi. For some time, it had been Xiaomi who passed on orders for Houston. As a result, even though he was not powerful, only a mere Heaven Saint Master, he possessed a special status in the Bloodsword sect. As a result, basically all the members of the upper echelon from the assassination organization had come. They had all come to see him off one last time. The valley only lacked one person now, which was Xiaomi's father, Houston. Houston had vanished from the Tianyuan continent many years ago. Even though Xiaomi had died, he still did not appear. Jianchen had used his soul to search the entire continent as well, not only going over every inch of the Tianyuan continent, but sweeping the territory of the 3 other races as well. However, he still failed to find any traces of Houston. Mingdong returned from the mountainous forests in the distance. He dragged a huge bear behind him as he walked toward the village. He seemed extremely ordinary, just like a regular mortal. He did not give off the bearing of a powerful expert at all. His white clothes were covered in specks of dust, as well as green from the plants he crushed in the forest. Mingdong dragged the black bear into the valley. As the bear's huge body scraped against the ground, it left behind a long trail. Without delay, Mingdong skinned and cleaned the bear, removing its monster core and chopping it into large pieces of meat. specifically to feed the villagers. A very large portion of the villagers were ordinary people. They needed 3 meals a day, and would only cultivate some saint force from time to time. However, they only cultivated to build a solid foundation for hunting, so that they could provide the tiny village with meat to eat. Ever since Ming Dong and Little Fatty had come back, the matter of hunting had always been handled by one of them. All the recent meat that had been consumed by the village had come from Ming Dong. After cleaning the huge bear, Ming Dong arrived before Jian Chen. Jian Chen Class 7. Radiant Saint Masters possess the ability to revive the dead, but you've surpassed that level already. Do you have a method of reviving Uncle Xiaomi? Jian Chen shook his head powerlessly. He stared at Xiaomi's coffin silently and gently sighed. Uncle Xiaomi's soul is incomplete because of a birth defect. Anything regarding the soul is very complicated. I may have reached the 9th class now, but I still don't possess the power for Uncle Xiaomi to regrow a soul. At the same time, Radiant Saint Masters can revive the dead, but there are conditions as well. Only those who have died with their souls intact can be revived. If a person dies and their soul is dispersed, they can't be revived even if they're a saint ruler. Ming Dong's hope was shattered by Jian Chen's explanation. He had not been very familiar with Xiaomi, but he was Xiao Tianyu's father after all. It was quite painful for Ming Dong to see how sad Xiao Tianyu was. Jian Chen, can you find my grandfather? Xiao Tianyu finally said something. He looked at Jian Chen full of hope. However, he was unable to contain his sorrow either. On such an important day, they could not be without Houston. Not only did Little Fatty wish Houston was present, but all the villagers wished that their old village head could come as well. Jian Chen shook his head again. He had no idea where Uncle Xiao had entered seclusion, or whether his presence had been concealed by the Empyrean demon orb or not. He had scoured the territories of the 4 races with his returnance-level soul, and even looked through a few unpopulated regions, as well as forbidden zones on the Tianyuan continent, but he failed to find any traces of Uncle Xiao. Jian Chen did not even miss the death nest. However, all he found there was Langkuros and Kaiser, the 2 former rulers of the beast god continent. Though the death nest's rather strange, all the vengeful spirits seem to have vanished. Is it because of the Tiger Emperor and Kaiser? They might actually have that ability as Saint Emperors, Jian Chen thought. However, he did not pay too much attention to the changes. What really interested him was the blood-red skeleton he had seen in the death nest before. The blood-red skeleton could not avoid Jian Chen's senses either. It squatted silently in the very depths of the death nest, surrounded by a large, dense red mist. It seemed to be slumbering. Back when they had fought over the saint's fruit, the blood-red skeleton had seemed undefeatable in Jian Chen's eyes, because it had surpassed Saint Emperor and possessed an unfathomable level of strength. But now, Jian Chen found that the skeleton's strength was equivalent to late receival, the same level as Ku Mu, who Jian Chen had killed in the spatial tunnel. According to local traditions, Xiaomi's funeral lasted for 7 whole days. Houston did not return during those days, and in the end, they buried Xiaomi without him on a small hill near the valley. Another ancient gravestone stood beside Xiaomi. It belonged to Houston's wife, Xiaomi's mother. Xiaomi's grave had been chosen to be beside the mother he had never seen. After the funeral, all the people of the Bloodsword sect bid farewell to Jian Chen. Under their vice sect master's lead, they left the valley. Jian Chen and Ming Dong chose to stay behind. They did not leave immediately. In the blink of an eye, 3 days had passed since Xiaomi had been buried. During those 3 days, Xiao Tianyu's grief gradually dulled, allowing him to slowly return to normal. Only his mother remained sad as tears constantly poured down her cheeks. Once Xiao Tianyu recovered, Jian Chen called him and Ming Dong, and over to leave the valley. Jian Chen found a suitable location to set down the Inata Tower, in the depths of the Cross Mountains. He took them to the 9th floor. He wanted to see if they could obtain the Inata Grand Prime's legacy. If Ming Dong and Xiao Tianyu failed, Jian Chen planned to go to the Huang family and get Huang Wuan to try. After that he would bring the people from the Changyang clan as well as Yin Zheng, Xingyuan, Wang Yifeng from the Flame Mercenaries, Qin Xiao from the Tianqin clan, the 3rd prince of the Qinhuang kingdom, Qingji, and so on. Chapter 1502. A Successor Found 2. The illusory heavenly palace of Bishing let out a dazzling, golden light on the 9th floor of the Inata Tower, illuminating quite a large portion of the floor. Even from extremely far away, the palace still appeared dazzling. The heavenly palace of Bishing had been the residence of the Inata Grand Prime. It was a famed place even within the saints' world. Not a single divine hall on the Tianyuan continent could compare to its grandeur. Any person who stood before it for the first time would be deeply stunned by how great it was. Ming Dong and Xiao Tianyu stood before the illusory palace. They stared at it in shock. The structure did not seem to be as simple as a palace in their eyes. Instead, it had become as great as the sky, the heavens that loomed over them. Jianchen, is this divine hall real or fake? I actually feel like I'm an insignificant ant before this divine hall with my strength as a saint emperor. The pressure of the structure is just too powerful, almost to the point where it's suffocating. Ming Dong returned to his senses first after a long while, but he remained fixated on the structure while sighing in surprise. Ming Dong's strength had been increased to Saint King by Jianchen's violet cloud peach before, and after over another decade, Ming Ding broke through once again by consuming the various heavenly resources from the Xianhuang microcosm left behind by Jianchen. He had become a saint emperor now. It's real and fake. Let's go. Follow me. There's the legacy of a peerless senior inside. Let's see if you are fated to obtain it. Don't ask too much about this place. Jianchen entered the illusionary structure first. A strange light immediately appeared in Ming Dong and Xiao Tianyu's eyes when they saw Jianchen standing on the illusory steps. They soon followed behind him with intense curiosity. They also began to climb the stairs. Jianchen brought the two of them to the familiar fortune jade seat. After some warnings, he got the two of them to sit on the seat. I've already become a saint emperor now while you're still a saint king. It's better for you to try obtain the legacy, Ming Dong said to Xiao Tianyu. Xiao Tianyu hesitated, but he did not turn Ming Dong down in the end. He walked over and sat down on the fortune jade seat. Jianchen stared fixedly at Xiao Tianyu. He knew that he himself was not fated to obtain the Inata Grand Prime's legacy, so he obviously hoped that someone among his friends would be fated. He had always felt rather selfish since he was unwilling to let such a great legacy fall into the hands of others. Several seconds later, Jianchen sensed the familiar and powerful force surge from the seat, pushing Xiao Tianyu off. Jianchen gently sighed. Xiao Tianyu's talent could be considered exceptional. If he could not obtain the Inata Grand Prime's legacy, then Jianchen really had no idea what kind of requirements were needed to gain its recognition. Maybe only the Saints' world possessed people who could obtain it, but they would not appear in lower worlds. It was Ming Dong's turn. He also sat down on the seat and closed his eyes like Xiao Tianyu, using his mind to sense the mysteries of the seat. Jianchen had already lost all hope now. He knew that probably no one in the lower world could obtain the Inata Grand Prime's legacy. Only prodigies of the Saints' world could fulfill the conditions that had been set. He believed that he would end up failing to find someone by his side who could obtain it. Just as he had expected, the extremely familiar power appeared from the fortune jade seat again. Jianchen had expected this outcome and did not feel surprised at all. He knew that Ming Dong would be pushed off the seat by the power. However, Jianchen's eyes suddenly narrowed. He stared at Ming Dong in surprise. His expression had changed too. The powerful and gentle force from the seat did not behave like Jianchen had imagined. It did not push Ming Dong off. Instead, it enveloped him, forming something akin to a cocoon. At the same time, the entire palace began to gently tremble. The illusory structure blurred at that moment, but it also began to shine brighter. The light was as blinding as the sun, dyeing the entire 9th floor a golden color. Jianchen could not help but close his eyes. The golden light had appeared quickly and disappeared even quicker. When Jianchen sensed the golden light vanishing, he also felt the ground fall from under him. Before he could react, he had become airborne. He was falling. Jianchen immediately stabilized himself in the air. When he opened his eyes, He was immediately stunned because not a single trace of the heavenly palace of Bishing remained. Only the stone tablets show how much he had refined remained. The entire palace had just disappeared into thin air. Jian Chen's face became extremely ugly, because the structure was not the only thing that had vanished. Ming Dong had disappeared as well. Ming Dong had vanished from the 9th floor with the illusory projection of the palace. Where's Ming Dong? Jian Chen, how has Ming Dong disappeared? Xiao Tianyu cried out while standing by Jian Chen's side. He looked around and became flustered and worried. Jian Chen's face sank. His soul immediately fused with the Anata Tower, as he carefully inspected each inch of the 9th floor. He attempted to find any traces of Ming Dong, but disappointment was the only outcome. Ming Dong seemed to have left the Anata Tower altogether. He was not present at all. Jian Chen slowly said after a moment of silence, "Looks like Ming Dong's faded with this senior. He's obtained the senior's recognition and left." Xiao Tianyu let out a breath of relief. He said, "Jian Chen, do you know where Ming Dong went?" "I want to look for him." Jian Chen sighed and gently shook his head. His face was filled with bitterness. He had already realized that it was extremely likely that Ming Dong had been taken away by the power within the Fortune Jade seat. He was no longer in this world. He did not know whether to celebrate or grieve. He would celebrate the high probability that Ming Dong had obtained the Anata Grand Prime's legacy and was destined to become a powerful expert of the Saints' world. He would grieve over the fact that two of them were in two different worlds now. He had no idea whether they would meet again in his lifetime. Chapter 1503, Marriage. Little fatty, let's go. We probably can't find Ming Dong so soon. There still might be a chance of finding him in the future, Jian Chen said rather dejectedly. He had never thought that the Fortune Jade seat in the heavenly palace of Bishing would teleport people away. If he had known this earlier, he would have never searched for a successor for the Anata Grand Prime on the Tianyuan continent in such a hurry. Although he had always wanted someone beside him to obtain the Anata Grand Prime's legacy, so that it would not end up with an outsider, he had not wanted Ming Dong to leave this world and be transported to the Saints' world all by himself. This was because the Anata Grand Prime was already dead. Even though Ming Dong had obtained the Grand Prime's legacy, he was unable to obtain the Grand Prime's protection. There were many people who desired the Anata Grand Prime's legacy. If any news revealing that Ming Dong possessed the legacy was leaked, he would find no refuge in the Saints' world. Ming Dong could have been protected if he had gained the legacy on the Tianyuan continent by Jian Chen. But Jian Chen was helpless if Ming Dong obtained the legacy in the Saints' world. Jian Chen left the Anata Tower with Xiao Tianyu and returned to Longevity Valley after storing the tower away. The sadness from Xiaomi's death had dulled. The villages who had lived there for generations gradually returned to their regular lifestyles. There were just a few people who were used to having Xiaomi around, so they became rather quiet. Yu had stayed beside Xiao Tianyu's mother, comforting her. Her identity was gradually deciphered by the villagers while she was there. The villagers who had lived there for generations may not have known what the princess of a kingdom was, but they only needed to know that she was Jian Chen's fiancée. That was enough for her to be warmly welcomed. Jian Chen did not stay in Longevity Valley for very long. After returning, he pulled Yu with him to Xiaomi's grave, paying his respects to him. Afterward, he bid farewell to all the villagers in the valley. Jian Chen, Miss Yu is so pretty. I've never seen such a pretty girl like Yu in my entire life. You have to treat her well, and not let her down. Jian Chen, you may not be a native of Longevity Valley, but all of us here have treated you as one of our own. When you get married to Miss Yu, you must invite us all. Uncle Han's right. Jian Chen, when you get married to Miss Yu, you have to invite all of us. Oh right. I've also heard from Little Fatty that you founded some city in the outside world, and that it's extremely famous. I can't remember the name of it. That's probably where you'll get married to Miss Yu, right? When that happens, don't forget us. Invite us to come, and also show us just how big your city is. Let's see which one is bigger, your city or our Longevity Valley. All the villagers of Longevity Valley came to chat with Jian Chun before he left, bidding him farewell. Quite a few of them mentioned Jian Chun and Yu Yu's marriage. Yu Yu blushed because of what they said. She seemed slightly embarrassed, but she was also filled with sweet love. Jian Chun replied to every single one of them with a smile. At this moment, one of the elderly members of the village walked over with a walking stick. He said to Jian Chun, "Little Chun, don't delay your marriage to the girl too much. I know you people who cultivate Saint Force can live a long time, so you have plenty of time. But there's quite a lot of us in Longevity Valley who don't cultivate. We can only live for 200 years at most. Don't wait a few hundred years, or even a few millennia before holding your wedding. You may have the time, but we don't. Sigh. I'm old and don't have many years left. I just hope that I can see you juniors get married during my final moments of life. Yeah. Don't wait till we've all disappeared to get married." A burly, middle-aged man chuckled beside the old man. He was joking. However, jokes could be taken seriously. When Jian Chun heard them, a bolt of lightning seemed to strike his head, causing his heart to heave. He knew that the next battle against the world of Forsaken Saints would definitely be the most intense yet. Not only would there be several dozen Receival experts, but there would be a few Returnance experts, and possibly the Spirit King, who had reached reciprocity and comprehended the ways of the sword. No one could guess the outcome of such an intense battle. Even Jian Chun was not confident he would survive. Jian Chun and Yu Yu left together after bidding farewell to all the people in Longevity Valley. Xiao Tianyu did not leave with them. Instead, he stayed behind to keep his heartbroken mother company. The Ziying sword flew as a resplendent streak of light above the clouds. However, many matters weighed on Jian Chun's heart as he stood on it. "Jian Chun, what's wrong? Is there something on your mind?" Yu Yu sensed the abnormality within Jian Chun and immediately asked a question out of concern. Jian Chun gently placed his arm around Yu Yu's waist. After a small moment of silence, he said, "Yuer, let's get married as soon as possible." Yu Yu had not expected Jian Chun make this decision so suddenly. She was stunned, but very soon, she understood Jian Chun's thoughts. She did not show any happiness at all, and instead became rather sorrowful. "Jian Chun, are you worried that we'll never be able to see each other again after the next battle against the foreign world?" Yu Yu gently inquired with a trembling voice. Jian Chun nodded slightly and said nothing else. He knew that his time with Yu Yu, his family and his friends, would likely come to an end during the next battle. The Tianyuan continent might even cease to exist altogether after the next battle. "Yuer, let's get married in 3 days. Is that fine with you?" Jian Chun asked. "Okay, we'll get married in 3 days. Jian Chun, since time is so tight, I'll go back and make preparations right now. Go fetch Huang Wan from the Huang family, as well as the woman who's given birth to your son. Let's all get married in 3 days." Yu Yu smiled, except her smile had lost its usual beauty. It seemed rather miserable. Chapter 1504. The Huang family. Jian Chun's heart ached when he saw Yu Yu's miserable smile. He had no idea whether the beauty before him, or how many of his friends and family, would still remain after the next battle against the world of Forsaken Saints. The Tianyuan continent could crumble, or be reduced to a group of islands scattered across the sea during the next battle. There was even the possibility that the entire continent would sink into the sea altogether, becoming a part of the sea. Even his life might come to an end during the next battle, his flames of life extinguished. Or maybe the Tianyuan continent would successfully repel the attack of the foreign world, and all the faces he knows would survive the battle. However, he also knew that this scenario was extremely unlikely to happen with the current difference in strength. Over a decade's passed, and the White Tiger still hasn't emerged from the Beast God Hall with the Winged Tiger God's legacy. Once he does emerge, he'll probably have reached the Origin Realm as well. The Beast God Hall will also be controlled by him. Senior Tianjian's still refining the Supreme Divine Hall left behind by Emotianyan as well. That Divine Hall is extremely extraordinary. I was unable to fathom it due to my weaker strength before. But now that I think about it, I probably wouldn't be able to smash through the Divine Hall even with my full strength now. If we use the Divine Hall to block the tunnel connecting the two worlds, we might be able to stop the people from the foreign world from reaching the Tianyuan continent, Jianshan thought. It was not impossible for the Tianyuan continent to stop the world of Forsaken Saints, but the outcome would depend on whether or not the White Tiger could successfully complete its inheritance and take control of the Beast God Hall, and whether or not Senior Tianjian could refine the Supreme Divine Hall in Mercenary City and use it to block the tunnel. Jianshan dropped Yu off. Yu left by herself to go prepare the wedding while Jianshan continued in the same direction, flying to the Huang family. The Huang family was incomparable to the past due to their ties with Jianshan and their ancestor Huang Tianba, who had now become a saint emperor. Thus they were renowned across the continent. They were no longer a silent hermit clan that could only reign supreme in a specific region. Even though there were many more saint emperors now, and even though Huang Tianba was not particularly extraordinary among them, Huang Tianba was still one of the most famous saint emperors among the four races. When Jianshan arrived at the Huang family, he found the entire clan covered by a powerful barrier that was several hundred meters wide with the manor at its center. It had personally been cast by Huang Tianba and was extremely powerful. Those who were not saint emperors could not break through it, and it functioned as the strongest line of defense for the Huang family. The Huang family still maintained its hermit-like status, even though it was countless times more powerful now, but the clan's cautious behavior did not change. As soon as Jianshan approached the barrier, two powerful presences immediately shot through the barrier that had been cast down by Huang Tianba. Two people fused with the surrounding space and flew over from the manor. They moved very fast, but they did not give off any sound at all. They were silent. Who has come? Speak your name. As the two figures rapidly drew closer, an ancient voice rang out. The voice was completely inaudible within the barrier, but as soon as it passed through, it thundered out, exploding across the surrounding mountains. The sound waves rolled for 100 kilometers, frightening the birds and the beasts in the forests below. Jianshan hovered at ease outside the barrier. He stared at the tiny manor several dozen kilometers away and gently smiled. He had not concealed his presence. In a gloomy room 1,000 meters beneath the manor, Huang Tianba suddenly opened his eyes and roused from his cultivation. The moment he opened them, they glowed, causing the entire room to light up. Two finger-sized holes punched through the unreinforced door. It's Jianshan. Ha 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 ha, he's disappeared for over a decade. It's been tough for my great-granddaughter. Huang Tianba chuckled from the bottom of his heart. With a flash, he disappeared from the room and went to personally receive Jianshan. At the same time, a tiny building completely made from bamboo stood in the forbidden grounds of the Huang family. Aside from the patriarch and Huang Tianba, no one could set foot in that region. Even the elders of the clan were not allowed there. There was only a small building in the quiet forbidden region. There were many flowers planted around the building, and every single one of them was very precious. Just their fragrances possessed unique effects, able to benefit those who cultivate it. There was even a flower that could not be seen elsewhere on the Tianyuan continent. Its fragrance was beneficial to saint emperors. This variety was called heaven-connecting flowers. The soil that they were planted in did not belong to the Tianyuan continent either. Currently, a slender woman in a yellow dress carried a watering can as she carefully watered the heaven-connecting flowers. She was focused on her task and her gaze was gentle, as if the flowers were her lover. She treated them gently as reminiscence flooded her eyes. The liquid in the watering can was green. It was filled with the presence of life. The water would cause saint rulers and saint kings to desperately fight over, and could create a blood storm on the Tianyuan continent. However, it was only used to water the flowers here. She was Huang Wan. Ever since Jianshan had left, she had departed from Mercenary City and spent many years living in this building. She took care of the flowers every single day and did not take a single step away from the forbidden region. She waited for Jianshan to return. Huang Wan would pour all her thoughts for Jianshan into the heaven-connecting flowers when Jianshan was not around. He had left them for her, so she seemed to see Jian Chun when she looked at the flowers. She felt like she was beside Jian Chun, as long as stood beside the flowers. Huang Wuan had become a saint emperor, while Jian Chun had been missing. Her seniority was not particularly great among the Huang family, but on par with an ancestor. Chapter 1505. Huang Wuan, however, just as the spring water was about to reach the flowers, Huang Wuan suddenly froze. The water in the watering can froze as well. She suddenly turned her head to look into the distance. Her eyes seemed to be able to pierce through space, able to see through the various obstructions, and observe an area several dozen kilometers away. That place just happened to be where Jian Chun was standing outside the barrier. Huang Wuan threw the watering can down, and the otherworldly liquid immediately poured out, radiating with a heavy presence of life. However, Huang Wuan did not even glance at the watering can on the ground right now. She gently trembled and stared into the distance full of both excitement and joy. Tears seemed to be pooling in her eyes. The two saint rulers from the manor arrived near the barrier at the same time. They did not pass through, and instead stood several dozen meters away from Jian Chun. Both of them were old men in white robes. One of them was ruddy with straight eyebrows, possessing a rather sagely bearing, while the other one seemed much more ordinary. Jian Chun silently hovered as he leisurely gazed at the two old men. He did not know their names, but he had seen them in the Huang family in the past. They had only been heaven saint masters back then, and after several dozen years, they had both broken through and reached saint ruler. "May I ask you who you are, sir? And why?" The sagely old man clasped his hands at Jian Chun and asked casually. However, before he finished speaking, his pupils narrowed while his eyes widened. He stared at Jian Chun in surprise as his facial expression rapidly changed. In the end, it morphed into an expression of shock, reverence, and disbelief. At the same time, the saint ruler by his side also revealed a drastically different expression. In the end, his facial expression also morphed into shock and reverence. He had also recognized Jian Chun, elder of the Huang family. Huang Bing greets sovereign Jian Chun. Elder of the Huang family, Huang Yifeng greets sovereign Jian Chun. Without any hesitation, the two saint rulers deeply bowed to Jian Chun. They showed him a lot of respect along with a smear of excitement. "Ha ha ha, Jian Chun, you finally appeared. If you still hadn't appeared, I probably would have gone to search the world for you in a few more years." A clear laugh rang out. Huang Tianba hovered in the air as he stepped toward Jian Chun. Every single step caused ripples to form in the air, and he crossed several dozen kilometers in just a few steps. "The human sovereign has come to visit my Huang family. This is our honor. Everyone, why don't you come out to welcome the human sovereign?" Huang Tianba laughed. His voice was very clear and reverberated throughout the territory of the Huang family. It alerted every single member of the clan. Even those who were in seclusion roused due to Huang Tianba's voice. Immediately, the whole clan began to surge over. Every single person in the Huang family stopped what they were doing, and all came out to receive Jian Chun. Jian Chun bitterly smiled at this sight. "Senior Huang, there's no need for this. Jian Chun, you've already become the sovereign of the humans. You're the greatest expert of the Tianyuan continent. Your status is extraordinary. It is my clan's honor to have you visit us. The honor of every single person here. We have to do this with your superior status." Huang Tianba laughed aloud. If any other saint emperor had seen Jian Chun, they would have definitely bowed to him to greet him. But Huang Tianba obviously did not need to go overboard, because of his connection to Jian Chun through his great-granddaughter, Huang Wuan. At this moment, both of them seemed to sense something. Jian Chun and Huang Tianba glanced toward the distant manor. All they saw was a yellow figure flying over, steadily approaching them. This figure was Huang Wuan. Tears pooled in her eyes as she looked at Jian Chun joyfully. However, she did not move quickly at all. Her speed as a saint emperor was extremely slow. "You're back." Huang Wuan arrived before Jian Chun. She did not say much at all, only a single sentence that contained her sentiment. Her voice trembled when she spoke. "I'm back." Jian Chun smiled at Huang Wuan. He then took a step and arrived right before her, opening his arms to hug her. Huang Wan tightly hugged Jianchen. She buried her head in his chest as her body shook violently. Tears rolled down her cheeks uncontrollably. Huang Tianba stroked his long beard and smiled as he watched on. He then waved his hands at the clansmen below and dismissed them all. He also left silently, leaving only Jianchen and Huang Wan in the air. Jianchen and Huang Wan strolled through the fragrant gardens in the forbidden zone of the Huang family. Huang Wan held onto Jianchen's arm, while a satisfied expression appeared on her face. She paid close attention to everything that Jianchen had gone through over the past few years. The garden was extremely peaceful. Aside from the two of them, there was no one else. At that moment, the forbidden grounds seemed to have become Jianchen and Huang Wan's entire world. At this moment, Jianchen stopped. He turned to Huang Wan and seriously asked, "Wan, or will you marry me?" Huang Wan glared at Jianchen. "It's not like you don't know about my feelings for you. Not to mention the fact that I became yours long ago. You already know whether I want to marry you or not. Then let's go back to Flame City. In 3 days we'll get married. Yue will also be there for the wedding and maybe even." Jianchen paused. He thought about the heavenly enchantress. The heavenly enchantress had given birth to his son, so by tradition, he should have married her. However, Jianchen was uncertain if the heavenly enchantress would accept his proposal because of her temperament. Huang Wan glared at Jianchen and furiously asked, "Jianchen, there's another woman besides you? Who is she?" On the Tianyuan continent, people call her the heavenly enchantress, except she's no longer a saint ruler now. Jianchen answered her and became melancholic. At that moment, he could not help but think of the first moment he had seen the heavenly enchantress. He remembered that it had been in the miniature world of Mercenary City back then. He had only been a puny little earth saint master, while the heavenly enchantress had been an indomitable expert in his eyes. The heavenly enchantress? It's actually her. Huang Wan was shocked. She also knew about the heavenly enchantress. In the past, the heavenly enchantress had also been an indomitable expert in her eyes as well. The heavenly enchantress had stood on equal footing with her ancestor, Huang Tianba. They had been dazzling. Chapter 1506. Shangguan Aojin's change. Jianchen left the Huang family with Huang Wan that same day and returned to Flame City. Soon after he returned, news that the captain of the Flame Mercenaries, also known as the City Lord of Flame City, and the greatest human expert, wedding was announced. The news spread across the entire continent in an extremely short amount of time, and in just half a day, the Sea Realm, the Beast God continent, and the Wasteland continent received the news as well. They were all shocked. The wedding would be held in Flame City, but the brides were not announced, leaving the entire world to wonder. Many people believed that there would be more than one bride in this grand wedding. There would definitely be a second, a third, or even more. Some people familiar with Jianchen had even guessed that Huang Wan would be Jianchen's second bride. Bai Yuntian also stopped cultivating in the artifact space and appeared in Flame City. She directed the entire city, personally making preparations and designs for her own son. Bai Lian took part as well. As the brides, Yu and Huang Wan disappeared. According to tradition, they could not appear before people until the day of the wedding. The king of the Jessan kingdom hurried over from afar. His face was lit with joy as he smiled from the bottom of his heart. He was also displaying his pride. Although he had become the king of the Jessan kingdom several dozen years ago, and the Jessan kingdom's current status was far greater than before, he personally had not felt as glorious as today. This was because after Jianchen and Yu's wedding, he would suddenly become the father-in-law of the greatest human expert. All the important figures of the Changyang clan in Lore City passed through space gates and arrived in Flame City. Jianchen's 3 aunts and Uncle Chang all took part in the preparations as well. At the same time, a large number of invitations made from purple gold were sent out from the city as well. They were sent everywhere, to all the people Jianchen was familiar with. Not only did the Qinhuang kingdom receive one, even Qin Xiao in the Tianqin clan received one as well. Portions of the invitations had even been sent to the Sea Realm, the Beast God continent, and the Wasteland continent by a few Saint Kings and Saint Emperors of Flame City. The entire city immediately became frantic. All the people who lived in the city began to wash the city walls and decorate everything with lanterns and streamers. All the members of the Flame Mercenaries freed themselves to help prepare for the wedding of their admirable captain. Jianchen did not take part in the preparations for the wedding. He left it all up to his seniors and Bai Lian to handle. He himself left the city and made his way to Three Saint Island. At this moment, the purple-dressed heavenly enchantress stood on the tip of Three Saint Island as she gazed at the Tianyuan continent. The wind there whistled, causing her dress to ruffle and her hair to dance in the wind. She carried a zither in her hands. It was 6 feet long and 1 foot wide. It had a total of 36 strings, and every single strings created its own light, as if some mysterious energy circulated within them constantly. Vaguely, the strings seemed to have recently been strummed, making them seem like they were emitting a note, but on closer inspection, there was no note at all. The heavenly enchantress stood there with her zither in her hands. She gazed at the Tianyuan continent with complicated emotions. In the reflection of her eyes, it was even possible to see a tiny flame city. Countless people were busy there. Some were hanging up decorations for the wedding. At this moment, a teenager who looked similar to Jianchen walked over from afar. He stared at the heavenly enchantress full of eagerness and asked, "Mother, Father's been missing for over a decade. No one has found any traces of him. When do you think he will return?" "Your father has already returned. You will see him very soon." The heavenly enchantress turned around and gently looked at the young man. The young man's face lit up when he heard her reply. He asked in disbelief, "Really? Has father really returned?" The young man was Shangguan Aojian. He had already grown up, growing into a handsome young man. He was no longer the child from before. However, no inexperience could be seen on his face. There was only a cold-blooded coolness. The faint smell of blood was even present on his body. This was the presence of someone who had gone through many fights of life and death. A dazzling speck of violet light suddenly appeared on the distant horizon as soon as he finished speaking. In less than a second, the violet speck turned into a streak of dazzling violet light. It flew over at an indescribable speed. Shangguan Aojian was immediately overjoyed when he saw the violet light. His face was filled with excitement. "It's father. It really is father. Mother, father really has returned." The violet light moved extremely quickly. In a single breath, it descended on Three Saint Island. The light vanished, revealing the white-clothed Jianchen. Jianchen only appeared several hundred meters away from the Shangguan Aojian. Jianchen did not even look at the heavenly enchantress. His gaze was fixated on Shangguan Aojian instead. He faintly smiled, but hidden within his smile was some shame. Jianchen could still clearly remember that a naive little boy. Now his son had completely grown up. Jianchen knew he had not been a good father. He had not tended to his responsibilities as a father at all. He owed his son just far too much. However, he had been left no choice in these matters either. He was filled with bitterness due to his lack of options. "Father, you finally returned," Shangguan Aojian emotionally said. He hurried over. His face was completely filled with joy from seeing Jianchen. He showed no intentions of blaming him or reprimanding his father. Jianchen walked over as well and tightly grabbed Shangguan Aojian by the shoulders. He closely examined his son. He could obviously sense the faint presence of blood on Shangguan Aojian. He also noticed the cold-blooded and resolute attitude his son had forged through rain and wind. "Xiaobao, you're all grown up," Jianchen said. His facial expression was extremely mixed. There was relief and solace as well as self-blame. He gently opened the front of Shangguan Aojian's robes and revealed most of his son's belly. There were 3 vicious scars on his son's belly, and they were all as wide as his body. Looking at the 3 vicious scars, Jianchen's heart immediately throbbed. Even though they had healed up long ago, Jianchen could still tell from the scars that just a single one of them would have been enough to cleave a person in two. Chapter 1507. Conversation. "Father, I left Three Saint Island when you were gone and wandered the Tianyuan continent, Beast God continent, the Wasteland continent, and the Sea Realm. All my wounds have come from the battles I experienced along the way. Shangguan Aojian gave an explanation when he saw that Jian Chun had noticed his scars. He spoke with pride. I did not initially plan on leaving these scars behind. I can erase all of them through the recovery of my chaotic body. But Mother made me leave these 3 behind. Jian Chun glanced at the heavenly enchantress, whose back was facing him while she gazed at the vast ocean. He obviously knew that she had gotten her son to keep these 3 scars just to show them to him. In other words, she had left the 3 scars to tell Jian Chun that when Xiao Bao had gone out adventuring and faced many dangers, even arriving at the brink of death several times, he had not accompanied his son as a father. Xiao Bao, I've vanished for over a decade, and in that time, I haven't helped you even once, even when you faced life-threatening danger. Do you blame me? Jian Chun asked with a gentle voice. He was filled with self-blame and shame. Shangguan Aojian shook his head. Instead of becoming angry, he instead revealed pride. He said, Father, I spent some time on the Tianyuan continent and heard rumors from the people around me. I've already learned about some of your past, and I also understand just how heavy your burden is. I can only feel honored to have a father like you. Jian Chun smiled, and also let out a breath of relief inside. What he feared the most was that Xiao Bao would blame him and find him to be a disappointment. Now his uneasy feelings had finally settled down because of what Shangguan Aojian had said. Even though he was the greatest human expert in the eyes of others, and even though he was a cold and merciless god of death in the eyes of his enemies, he was only a father to Xiao Bao, a kind father. And I also came across an unfathomably powerful senior in the Sea Realm. I couldn't see the senior's appearance, but the senior knew you extremely well. I learned much of your past from the senior, and she let me understand just what price you had to pay to reach your current level of cultivation in just a few decades, said Shangguan Aojian. He gazed at Jian Chun with admiration. Oh yeah, the senior from the Sea Realm also gave me a jade pendant. This pendant saved my life when I faced fatal danger. Shangguan Aojian pulled out a palm-sized pendant. The jade carving on it was exquisite and was covered with simple patterns. In the center of the patterning was a trident that seemed sharp enough to pierce through space. A pressure seemed to emanate from the weapon, powerful to cause a Saint Emperor to shiver. Jian Chun looked at the jade pendant. He could sense the power of an Origin Realm expert hidden within it, and it was extremely familiar. He knew exactly who the senior from the Sea Realm Shangguan Aojian had mentioned was. Xiao Bao, you have to hang on to this jade pendant. It can help you block many full-powered attacks from Saint Emperors. You don't even need to worry about Saint Emperors with it, said Jian Chun. Not only was great strength required to produce such a pendant, but a corresponding amount of skill was also required. Jian Chun did not know how to make a pendant like this, so he was unable to produce a defensive treasure that could block attacks from Saint Emperors. Shangguan Aojian was surprised. He carefully put the pendant away before glancing at Jian Chun and the heavenly enchantress. He smiled. Father, Mother, you keep talking. I'll go out and catch some fish. It's rare for the 3 of us to eat together, so we need to properly celebrate like the fishermen on the island today. With that, Xiao Bao left the island. Only Jian Chun and the heavenly enchantress were left on the peak of Three Saint Mountain after his departure. Jian Chun looked at the heavenly enchantress. His emotions were mixed. He walked over and slowly approached her side. He gently sighed. Mu'er, it's been so many years already. Even Xiao Bao's grown up. Are you still unable to get over what happened in the past? Call me the heavenly enchantress, the heavenly enchantress coldly and emotionlessly replied. But complicated feelings flashed through her enchanting eyes. The heavenly enchantress is only a name given to you by the people of the Tianyuan continent. Shangguan Mu'er is your real name, said Jian Chun. When the heavenly enchantress heard her own name, she immediately trembled. She gently bit her lip and revealed a sliver of sorrow deep in her eyes. If you continue to disown your name, then having Xiao Bao's surname as Shangguan will be pointless, continued Jian Chun. The heavenly enchantress remained silent. She slowly sat down and placed her zither on her legs. Using her hands to touch the strings, she played a pleasant melody. Each note seemed to be filled with a mysterious charm that penetrated the soul and reverberated in the mind. The notes could also affect one's emotions and thoughts. The music was pleasant, but it lost its usual springiness. Instead, it became rather heavy. Jianchen also sat down beside the heavenly enchantress. He gazed at her face and said, "I know you resent me. A portion of this resentment comes from Xiao Bao. Through all those years he grew, I did not fulfill my responsibilities as a father. I was not around to protect him either when he was in danger. However, you also know that I was left without a choice. I may have vanished for over 10 years, but I've always spent that time trying to strengthen, only hoping to gain an even greater power, to fend off the next invasion of the foreign, so that I can protect our world. I've come closer to death than I've ever had in the past. I was just an inch away from death, and my soul had almost dispersed. I did survive in the end, fortunately enough, but the price I paid was my entire body. I will make it up to Xiao Bao. I will make up everything to him tenfold." The heavenly enchantress was not wavered by his words at all. She behaved as if she had not heard Jianchen at all. She focused on her zither, concentrating on playing it. She did not pay attention to anything else. Jianchen fell silent for a while before continuing. 3 days from now, I will be holding a wedding with Yuer and Luaner. I will take you with me to make up for the lack of a wedding. At the same time, I will let the entire world know that Shengguan Aojian is my son. I won't go and neither will Xiao Bao." This time, the heavenly enchantress said something. Her voice was cold and firm. Jianchen sighed. He looked at the heavenly enchantress, feeling quite the headache, and said, "Mu'er, there are some things that are set in stone by fate. No matter how much you dislike them, they are unchangeable. Tell me this once you've truly fulfilled your responsibilities as a father, and weddings are completely pointless. Only mortals hold things like that." The heavenly enchantress coldly replied. She continued to play her zither, except the music sounded even heavier. Jianchen secretly rejoiced. He could tell that most of her resentment had disappeared. The main reason why she was displeased with him was because of Xiao Bao. Jianchen's mind suddenly cleared up, due to what the heavenly enchantress said. Marriage to mortals was a significant matter, a ceremony that was almost crucial. It was indeed nothing to fighters with lengthy lives. Some of them did not even follow the tradition of getting married. As long as the two people involved agreed, there was no need for a ceremony at all. They just needed to become a couple. There was not even a need to tell their parents or the seniors of their clans. The reason why many people still maintained the traditions of mortals was because all fighters had started out as one. Even though a few of them were powerful, they still followed tradition, since it was difficult to disregard the traditions of mortals. Jianchen no longer placed so much focus on the wedding. After reaching this understanding, holding a wedding was something that had slowly developed among mortals. It did not signify anything. In reality, he and the heavenly enchantress, as well as Huan Luang, had already become couples. Even without marriage, nothing was able to change that fact. The last matter I want to talk about is your father. I hope you can visit your father and the ancestor of the Tsar family, Zarkayun. Her soul is damaged and she's in a coma. She cannot recover with just heavenly resources. But I do believe that you possess the power to awaken her." Jianchen mentioned his final reason for visiting, and he also looked at the heavenly enchantress with some gentleness as well. Chapter 1508. Thinking things through. Jianchen seemed to have crossed the heavenly enchantress' bottom line when he mentioned the final matter. The heavenly enchantress' presence immediately changed, and she stopped playing the zither. At that moment, Jianchen could clearly feel an iciness emanating from the heavenly enchantress. Her presence affected the surroundings, causing the temperature at the peak of Three Saint Mountain to plummet. It felt like winter was coming. "Mind your own business," the heavenly enchantress coldly said. She was expressionless, but her eyes were frigid. Jianchen knew that the heavenly enchantress still resented Hao Wu. She did not have a good impression of Zarkayun either, so Jianchen immediately felt pained. "Mu'er, did you know that when I was young, I was known as the prodigy of my clan. My father, my mother, and the caretaker Uncle Chong, as well as many other people in the clan, held extremely high hopes for me. This was because I could learn anything and learn it quickly. You could even say that I had photographic memory, so I was better than anyone the same age as me. At that time, both my mother and father cared for me very much, treating me like a treasure in their hands. Until a few years later, when I took part in a test for Saint Force, the test revealed that I possessed no talent for Saint Force due to an accident, so I became labeled as a cripple. I was unable to gather Saint Force within me and condense a Saint weapon. This piece of news spread across the entire clan very quickly, revealing that the talented young master was actually a cripple. I fell from heaven to hell in a single stroke. My father Changyangba rarely visited me after that. In fact, I could count the number of times I saw him with my fingers during those years. Only my mother, sister, second aunt, and Uncle Chong still cared for me like before. Although I was a young master of the Changyang clan, son of the current patriarch Changyangba, there were people who would come and bully me in the clan. They would make fun of me and harass me. And my father never helped me at all, maybe because he forgot that he had me as a son. However, even though that happened, I do not resent my father, nor do I blame him because he is my father by blood. He gave me my life. In other words, it was me who valued this connection of family very much, because I had parents. Even though my father owed me a lot, I still found happiness, because their existence is my happiness. On the Tianyuan continent, there are many orphans, where some of their parents even pass away as soon as they're born, due to certain circumstance. They never enjoy love or care when they were young. They might not even know what their parents look like. I understand their pain, and know we are all better off compared to those people. At the very least, we have our seniors and family. Mua, I heard about your past from your father. I know you resent your father, and a major part of that comes from your mother. Your father actually regrets the past very much as well, except it's already happened. There's nothing he can do by regretting it. He can't go back in time. No one can change the past. At the same time, there are just some things you can never regain after you lose them. He's still your father by blood. He's your closest family in the world. Jianchen deeply sighed. He gazed at the vast ocean, and suddenly became rather stern. He continued, "At the same time, the next invasion of the world of Forsaken Saints is growing closer and closer. I know their strength, and so do you. The disparity is just far too great. It's like heaven and earth. We are at a disadvantage in overall battle prowess and peak strength. There might not even be any hope of emerging victorious during the next battle. The only hope for us is for a divine hall to block the entrance of the tunnel. But I still don't know when the Supreme Divine Hall in Mercenary City will be completely refined, and whether or not we can successfully block the entrance at all. If we can't stop the foreign world from invading, it will be our end. There will only be death. Even I am not confident I will surviving, but I know my friends and family will all die in that battle. The entire human race may end up dead due to that battle, including your father, Hao Wu." What Jianchen said near the end was like a bolt from the blue for the heavenly enchantress. It caused her to quiver and pale slightly. A deep rumble came from her zither as well. 3 strings had snapped. Jianchen looked at the heavenly enchantress. "What I just said is the worst-case scenario. Maybe I can survive the next battle, but many experts will definitely die on the continent. You might not be able to see your father ever again after that battle. During this limited period of peace, maybe you should spend these final moments with your family. You don't know how valuable some things are when they are there. You only realize how important they are to you once you have lost them. When that happens, it will be too late." Jianchen spoke very softly and very nonchalantly. However, the heavenly enchantress' heart churned when she heard his words. She began to quiver even more intensely. She was caught in a struggle. A while later, the heavenly enchantress slowly calmed down. She lowered her head and looked at the broken strings. Her eyes were filled with mixed emotions, confusion and sorrow. She slowly raised her right hand and gently rubbed the broken strings. In just a few seconds, the strings were fixed and reattached. The heavenly enchantress slowly stood up. She gazed at the distant Tianyuan continent. The zither in her hands immediately turned into a blur and disappeared into her right hand as an extremely powerful energy. She left the island with her hands empty, flying toward the Tianyuan continent. Jian Chen's words had influenced. They had also made her understand that she might not be able to see her own father ever again after the next battle. As a result, she wanted to go to the Tianyuan continent to see him. She put her zither away because she did not want to visit him as the heavenly enchantress, but as Shangguan Mu'er. Jian Chen deeply sighed as he watched the heavenly enchantress grow further away. He smiled before sending a message to Shangguan Aojian, who currently lay on a boat. He then followed the heavenly enchantress. The heavenly enchantress could build space gates, but she did not build on this time. Instead, she flew, flying from Three Saint Island to the Tianyuan continent. Jian Chen stood on the Ziying sword by her side. Even though she was flying, she moved extremely fast, at a speed that completely surpassed what a Saint Emperor could reach. Chapter 1509. Zarkayun awakens in an ancient mountain range quite far away from the city of God. A violet streak of light suddenly appeared on the horizon, shooting across the sky like a violet comet. It disappeared into the depths of the mountain range after a moment. The violet streak of light was Jian Chen riding the expanded Ziying sword. The heavenly enchantress walked beside him. She seemed to be casually strolling through the air, but the space around her trembled gently, constantly changing. Visible ripples of space appeared beneath her as well. She seemed to be teleporting an extremely far distance with each step. She was no slower than Jian Chen. The heavenly enchantress had already surpassed Saint Emperor and had reached the origin realm. Her control and usage of space surpassed ordinary receival experts. Jian Chen was not surprised by the heavenly enchantress' rapid growth at all. Even ignoring the yin and yang energies she had absorbed from the yin-yang Saint Rock, Xiao Bao had gifted the heavenly enchantress a huge fortune. Xiao Bao possessed the innate chaotic body, which was rare even in the immortals' world. As the mother of Xiao Bao, the heavenly enchantress was blessed by the world, blessing her with a smooth cultivation path. As long as she did not die, she would definitely become an emperor. Not a saint emperor of the Tianyuan continent, but an immortal emperor of the immortals' world. Even in this sealed world, the heavenly enchantress could break through Saint Emperor without any obstructions. Jian Chen suspected this was because of Xiao Bao. The seal preventing the breakthrough to the origin realm was extremely powerful, but it was not perfect. It was unable to stop those who cultivated the chaotic body like him and Xiao Bao. The war god of the 100 races, Tai Ta, or Xiao Jin and Xiao Ling, natural spirits of the world. Jian Chen and the heavenly enchantress entered the depths of the mountain range before stopping in front of a tiny wooden shack at the top of a mountain. The wooden structure had stood there for several decades, constantly buffeted by the wind, and had become extremely weak. It was like an old man close to death, creaking in the wind, as if it was about to collapse. The Ziying sword returned to its original size and stuck to Jian Chen's back. Jian Chen stood beside the heavenly enchantress, quietly looking at the wooden structure. The heavenly enchantress also stared at it as her feelings became extremely complicated. The person in the shack seemed to sense the arrival of others. With a creak, the wooden door slowly opened, revealing Hao Wu. Hao Wu stood at the tiny entrance. The simple, white robes he wore seemed rather old. His face was haggard, filled with the heavy weight of exhaustion. Even though Hao Wu's appearance had not changed much, Jian Chen still felt like he was far older now. Mu'er. Hao Wu was immediately stunned when he caught sight of the heavenly enchantress. His quivering voice was filled with serendipity and disbelief, along with some complicated and bitter emotions. Remorse immediately overwhelmed Shangguan Mu'er's heart. It ached when she saw how much older Hao Wu had become, as well as his haggard, disheveled face and graying hair. She had once resented Hao Wu, refusing to even accept him as her father. To her, not only did Hao Wu owe her mother a lot since he never gave her happiness, but her mother had even died because of him. He never showed any true concern for her either. Shangguan Mu'er only suddenly realized after what Jian Chun had said that even though she hated her father very much, he still possessed a certain level of significance in her heart. After all, he was her father as well as her only blood relative left in the world. It was just that this level of significance was nothing compared to her hatred for him. It was nowhere near enough for her to make up to him. The reason why she had come this time was to spend a short period of time with him before the next invasion of the world of Forsaken Saints. This visit could even be their last moments together. After the next battle, maybe the world would no longer possess a heavenly enchantress or a Hao Wu, or maybe she could survive with her origin realm strength, but Hao Wu would perish. "Father," Shangguan Mu'er said with great difficulty. Her voice trembled slightly and was rather raw. At that moment, her feelings were extremely mixed. She was not even certain what she was feeling. Hao Wu was stunned by what the heavenly enchantress had said. His body trembled even more as 2 streaks of turbid tears uncontrollably rolled down his cheeks. "Mu'er, why, you're finally willing to call me father?" Hao Wu was overjoyed. He felt like he was in a wonderful dream. He had wanted Shangguan Mu'er to refer to him as father for so long that it had become an unrealistic dream. Shangguan Mu'er gently bit her lower lip. She said nothing and looked away from Hao Wu, now focusing on the shack behind him. As she gradually raised her right hand, a tremendous and powerful energy immediately surged forth, condensing into her zither in a single moment. She began to play it gently. The music was light but also very deep. Each note seemed to possess an irresistible charm, able to pierce all obstructions and affect the soul. Jian Chun had heard her play something like this on 3 Saint Island in the past. She had used this melody to comfort his great-grandfather's soul, but it was slightly different as well. When he heard it, his soul was affected as well. At that moment, he felt extraordinarily calm, and comfort filled the depths of his soul. The music seemed to be able to heal injuries of the soul. Jian Chun was shocked. Injuries to the soul were the most difficult to deal with. Any heavenly resource that could heal the soul was invaluable. They were also extremely rare and precious. However, just the heavenly enchantress music possessed such an effect, which he found rather unbelievable. Jian Chun could even feel that the music had other effects aside from healing the soul. Just listening to it would benefit one's soul. Very soon, the music stopped and the melody came to an end. The zither disappeared from the heavenly enchantress' arms, and at the same time, Zartsayun's eyelids slightly trembled. She finally showed signs of movement after being unconscious for many years. Chapter 15:10. Zhou Qian's close call. Zarkayun, who had been in a coma for many years, awakened because of Shangguan Mu'er's melody. At the same time, Jian Chun left, returning to Flame City. He left to give Shangguan Mu'er, Hao Wu, and Zarkayun some space. He could no longer interfere with how they dealt with each other. This was all he could do. There were still 2 days before Jian Chun's wedding. When he returned to Flame City, the entire city possessed a new appearance. Whether it was the various shops in the city, or the residential zones for the members of the mercenaries, they had all been covered with decorations. The entire city was bubbling with joy. The Divine Realm was a famed place in the Sea Realm. Not only was it famous because of how dangerous it was, where even 17th-star experts could die, but it also hid many fortuitous encounters as well as treasures that could make 15th and 16th-star experts waver. The divine water of the world was one particular example. Not only could it change someone's constitution, making a cripple become a cultivation prodigy, but it could also condense one's soul and strengthen it. It also increased the chances of a saint ruler breaking through to Saint King. As a result, even though the Divine Realm was a terrifying place that could claim the lives of saint emperors, the danger was not enough to stop countless adventurers from gathering and forming groups to enter in search of treasure. At this moment, several people jetted toward the exit of the Divine Realm. The person at the very front was disheveled and pale. He was covered with wounds and heavily injured. Behind him were 5 other figures radiating with presences no weaker than him. They were pursuing him. All 6 of them were saint rulers. It was impossible for the person fleeing to outrun his enemies due to his heavy injuries. As a result, the 5 saint rulers inched closer. In the end, the 5 people caught up a few dozen kilometers away, and an intense battle immediately erupted. Even if the fleeing person had been in peak condition, he definitely would not have been able to fend off 5 other people, let alone defend himself while he was heavily injured. As a result, as soon as they began fighting, he was knocked away and spit out blood. His injuries became even heavier, and he even lost the ability to flee. As if the 5 saint rulers knew that their opponent had been incapacitated, they took their time. They slowly surrounded the bloodied saint ruler on the floor. One of them sneered, "Zhou Chuyan, how are you worthy of possessing 16th star quaking thunders? If you knew you'd end up like this, why didn't you just hand them over? That way, you would have been able to emerge alive at the very least. It's just a pity that you made the 5 of us chase you all the way from the depths of the divine realm here for the quaking thunders. Even if you hand them over willingly now, we will not forgive you." As he said that, he slowly raised the spear in his hand, targeting Zhou Chuyan's head. Zhou Chuyan lay on the floor as he stared at the 5 of them. His eyes were filled with regret, but he seemed to understand that he could not avoid death no matter what today. He sighed inside and slowly closed his eyes. The moment his eyes shut, he could not help but think of his daughter Zhou Lin. "Linner, I won't be able to accompany you in the future. You have to look after yourself." At death's doorstep, the one thing that Zhou Chuyan found most difficult to let go of was his daughter, who he had left in Divine City. At the same time, the saint ruler's arm suddenly moved. The spear in his hand shot toward Zhou Chuyan's head with lightning-like speed, appearing as a blur. However, just when the spear had traveled halfway, the space around them suddenly froze. At that moment, time seemed to stop around the 6 people. The spear that had been targeting Zhou Chuyan's head froze there as well. It was unable to cross the remaining distance no matter what. It was not just the spear. Even Zhou Chuyan and the saint rulers who were pursuing him had been immobilized by the frozen space. They were stuck. Shock and fear filled the eyes of the person wielding the spear. He was unable to move at all even with his strength as a 6th heavenly layer saint ruler, so it was impossible for a saint ruler to have frozen the space around them. Even 9th heavenly layer saint rulers could not achieve such a feat. This could only be the work of a saint king. Similar emotions flooded the eyes of the 4 other saint rulers. A saint king was actually stopping them from killing Zhou Chuyan. Even if the saint king was not acquainted with Zhou Chuyan, just freezing the space around them signified that this saint king wanted to save him. They could only pray that the saint king was not familiar with Zhou Chuyan and was just lending a hand when in need. That way, they still had a chance of living. Zhou Chuyan could also sense the changes of the space around him. He immediately opened his eyes and saw a white-dressed woman, who seemed to be in her 20s. A fist-sized beast lay on her shoulder. The woman was emotionless. She looked at the 5 saint rulers who had hunted down Zhou Chuyan with cold killing intent. She coldly said, "I hate those who kill for treasure the most." With just that, the woman's palm gently touched the heads of the 5 saint rulers. Immediately, their eyes dimmed before losing all light in a single moment. They had become empty shells. The gentle strike from the woman had wiped out their souls. Space returned to normal, and the 5 saint rulers collapsed powerlessly. The woman passed over their corpses and made her way to the exit of the divine realm. She paid no attention to Zhou Chuyan, as if she did not help Zhou Chuyan to save him, and only helped because she found people who killed for treasure annoying. Zhou Chuyan stood up with great difficulty and clasped his hands at the woman who was traveling further away. "I am the captain of the Blue Sky Adventurers, Zhou Chuyan. I thank Senior's kindness for saving my life." The woman paid no attention to Zhou Chuyan. She stepped toward the exit, and in just a few steps, vanished from his vision. Zhou Chuyan deeply sighed after surviving. He pulled out medicine from his space ring and consumed it. He then collected the space rings of the 5 saint rulers before leaving in a hurry. He had come close to dying many times in the past, but this was the closest he had ever come to death. He had already made up his mind to never venture into the divine realm again. He wanted to return to the Tianyuan continent with his daughter. Even if it meant death to return, he wanted to die in his homeland. At this moment, the woman who had saved Zhou Chuyan stood outside the divine realm. She gloomily looked at the familiar world and showed deep anguish. However, it was soon drowned out by roaring hatred. An icy cold killing intent radiated from her body. She discerned her orientation and shot off. Chapter 1511. Kaiya's return. The TYT tribe was a medium-sized organization in the Sea realm. Even though the organization was nameless, it possessed a certain status within a radius of 1,000,000 kilometers. This was because the TYT tribe possessed a saint ruler ancestor. He had already reached the 14th star, now extremely close to the 15th star. The TYT tribe had united with the Golden Sword tribe, Herman tribe, Dakar clan, and Tingwei clan through marriage, for other clans with saint rulers, so they were extremely close. They were close to forming an alliance, where the 5 of them would join together completely. Although none of the 5 clans possessed any saint kings, if the 5 saint rulers worked together, they could dominate the surrounding 1,000,000 kilometers and reign supreme. And today was a joyous occasion for the TYT tribe. This was because the son of the current patriarch of the TYT tribe was marrying the young lady of the Golden Sword tribe, so a happy atmosphere loomed over the entire TYT tribe. The patriarchs of the TYT tribe and Golden Sword tribe sat high up together. They smiled as they gazed at the new couple below. The greatest human expert, Sovereign Jian Chun, will be holding a wedding in 2 days in Flame City. Our wedding today will be borrowing the joy from his wedding. In the future, I won't hold hopes for you to become people like Sovereign Jian Chun. I just hope you can become emperors. The patriarch of the TYT tribe toasted to the new couple below. As soon as he finished speaking, quite a few of the guests immediately added their support. These people all belonged to smaller clans, so as long as they could get on the TYT tribe's good side, they would be able to achieve glory. The patriarch of the TYT tribe sat with a smile, as the people around him tried to curry favor. Other people only believed that the hope of his son becoming an emperor was only a casual comment, but only he knew that there would definitely be an emperor in their clan in their future. This was because he took part in wiping out the Kaler tribe all those years ago. He knew that the young lady of the Kaler tribe, Kaiya, had fled, and even the 5 saint ruler ancestors were unable to force her to stay. His tribe would not need to take anything to heart if Kaiya only possessed ordinary talent. However, not only was Kaiya a cultivation genius, having reached saint ruler at such a young age, but she practiced the cultivation method of the Octoterra Emperor as well. It possessed so much potential that she would definitely reach Saint King and become a Saint Emperor. In order to fend off Kaiya's revenge, the 5 clans that all took part in the operation united with one another through marriage. They had schemed together. However, they knew that if she became a Saint King, they would not be her opponent even if they worked together. If she became a Saint Emperor, she could probably wipe the 5 clans off the face of the Sea realm with just a wave of her hand. As a result, they urgently required the protection of a Saint King, or even a Saint Emperor. It was extremely unlikely for the 5 ancestors to reach Saint King due to their limited talent, so they would probably end up remaining as saint rulers forever. As a result, the 5 clans could only place their hopes on their talented descendants. Just as the TYT tribe and Golden Sword tribe celebrated the wedding, a white figure appeared in the sky far away. She was a woman who seemed to be in her 20s. Even though she was not alluring, she still possessed some beauty. At the same time, a tremendous presence radiated from her unintentionally, causing the surrounding space to gently tremble. The woman ran through the air. She moved extremely quickly, arriving above the TYT tribe like she had teleported despite only being on the horizon the moment before. A fist-sized beast perched obediently on her shoulder. The entire clan did not sense the woman's arrival at all. They joyously continued celebrating the wedding. The woman coldly glanced at the TYT tribe below. Her eyes were immediately filled with extremely heavy hatred. In a single moment, a powerful killing intent swept out from her, not only causing the surrounding temperature to plummet, but the killing intent turned into an bone-chilling wind as well. It caused the surroundings to churn, and caused the energy of the world to become chaotic. Afterward, she waved her hand, and a powerful barrier immediately enveloped the entire clan. The powerful killing intent sank to the ground, and crushed down on everyone. The people below could not help but shiver as their expressions changed. The wedding came to a halt as well. All the people in the TYT tribe lost their warm smiles at that moment. They all stared at the sky in shock, and only then did they discover the woman who had appeared in the air. The patriarchs of the two clans, as well as all the members of the upper echelon, revealed drastically different expressions when they saw the woman. Their hearts churned as well. Kaya, the patriarch of the TYT tribe said with a trembling voice. At that moment his face became devoid of blood. Even a trace of despair had appeared. The patriarch of the Golden Sword tribe looked the same. The two of them were not saint rulers, but they had seen saint rulers before, and were extremely familiar with them. Kaya was no longer a saint ruler in their eyes. She had surpassed that realm of cultivation. Another powerful presence appeared, but it was insignificant compared to Kaya's killing intent. It was like an ant to an elephant. The ancestor of the TYT tribe appeared. He was the pride of the clan, as well as the only saint ruler of the TYT tribe. He had already reached the 8th heavenly layer. However, he also stared at Kaya with an ashen face. He appeared very stern. In the past, he and 4 ancestors of the other clans had pursued Kaya, forcing her into the depths of the divine realm before giving up. If it were not for the fact that they had not been confident that they could stay alive in the depths of the divine realm, they would have continued to pursue her, without any hesitation at all. Back then, the 5 of them had guessed that Kaya might not end up dead in the depths of the divine realm, because of the cultivation method she practiced, so they would come face to face with her revenge one day. As a result, the 5 clans had prepared themselves throughout the past few years, waiting for her to take revenge. They had even begun preparing some wealth to recruit a Saint King to protect them in another few decades. What they never expected was that Kaya would come back for revenge so quickly, let alone assume that her strength would have increased at such a terrifying rate. She had become a Saint King in less than 2 decades. They had believed that she would have required a century, at the very least, before coming back for revenge, even with the cultivation method of the Octaterra Emperor. Chapter 1512. Killers of the Divine Realm. Kaya, I sure have underestimated you. I never thought that you would grow to such an extent in such a short amount of time. No matter how impressive your talent is, no matter if your cultivation is created by an emperor, it's impossible for you to improve so quickly. Looks like you've had quite an impressive fortuitous encounter in the Divine Realm, the ancestor of the TYT tribe said with a deep voice. At that moment he was filled with regret. He regretted the fact that the 5 clans needed to wait so long before they could invite an expert to guard them. If their clan possessed a Saint King, they would still possess the ability to battle against the now strengthened Kaya. All the people who had come to the wedding became extremely pale within the barrier. They were very shocked. Many of them knew about the devastation of the Kaler tribe many years ago. Although they were not a famed clan within the Sea Realm, they had still been a clan that had possessed a saint ruler after all. They were also quite famous in the surrounding 1,000,000 kilometers. So it caused a large disturbance in the region when the entire organization fell in one night. Although the people responsible were never found, quite a few people had guessed from some hints that the ancestors of the TYT tribe, Golden Sword tribe, Herman tribe, Dakar clan, and Tingwei clan had taken part in the disaster. However, no one stepped forward for the Kaler tribe either. What shocked the guests was that the young lady of the Kaler tribe, Kaya, had already become a Saint King. She had come to seek revenge against the TYT tribe, trapping everyone, including those unrelated, within the barrier. This caused all of them to become fearful and unsettled, afraid that Kaya would kill them too. Even if several saint rulers worked together, they would not be able to quickly smash through a barrier cast down by a Saint King, let alone this group of guests right now. Seeing the saint ruler of the TYT tribe, Kaya's killing intent soared once more. Her eyes had almost become bloodshot. She would never forget the moment when the saint ruler, before her, had attacked her father, along with the ancestors of the 4 other clans. She would not forget about how the 5 of them pursued her and forced her to flee into the depths of the divine realm. The TYT tribe, Golden Sword tribe, Herman tribe, Dakar clan and Tingwei clan. The 5 of you wiped out my clan all those years ago. I have returned today, and will make you pay a heavy price for what you did. I will take the lives of all your clansmen for wiping out the Kaler tribe, Kaya said in resentment. She glanced at the guests who were not a part of the 5 clans and said, "If you're not a part of the 5 clans I just mentioned, and you don't want to die, leave through the barrier immediately. I will kill everyone left in it in half a minute." All the innocent guests lit up when they heard her words. Without any hesitation, everyone immediately flew out of the barrier, as if they were fleeing for their lives. No one dared to stay for too long. There were even a few members of the TYT tribe who understood the disaster they were facing, so they blended into the fleeing crowd. However, as soon as they came in contact with the barrier, they were knocked back, unable to pass through it like everyone else. In the blink of an eye, all the guests had left. No one was willing to stay behind, including those who had extremely close ties to the TYT tribe. If their opponent was at a similar level of strength, maybe some of them would have remained behind. However, no one was willing to die for the TYT tribe when they were faced with utter doom. The ancestor of the TYT tribe did not pay attention to the situation. He completely concentrated on Kaya. When Kaya had lowered her guard, he moved. He turned into a blur in the sky and approached Kaya in a silent flash. He hurled his palm at her forehead. He knew the difference in strength between him and a Saint King. As a result, he did not hold back at all when he attacked. He pushed his speed to the limit as well and sneakily attacked Kaya. He did not even draw his weapon because he knew that this might be the only chance for him to heavily injure Kaya, as well as his only chance to survive. However, as soon as he began to approach Kaya, the space around him froze in an instant. He came to a halt, having been completely immobilized by the frozen space. That was not all. Even his attack stopped before Kaya. At the same time, the tiny beast on Kaya's shoulder opened its eyes at that moment. It stared at the ancestor of the TYT tribe with an enticing gaze, as if it was not looking at a person, but a platter of delicious food. Kaya looked at the immobilized enemy before her and coldly said, "Back then, I wasn't your opponent, so I could only watch helplessly as my father was killed by you. But today, you no longer have the power to hurt me, even if you attempt a sneak attack to catch me off guard." As she said that, Kaya raised a hand. It landed gently on the ancestor's chest. The ancestor of the TYT clan vomited blood and pieces of organs. His entire body fell out of the air and smashed into the ground. He created a huge ditch and lost the ability to climb out of it. Just striking him with her palm had heavily injured him. His organs had been destroyed, and his bones had fractured. He lost the ability to stand. Seeing how puny their strongest ancestor was before Kaya, all the members of the TYT tribe appeared ashen. Despair filled their eyes. "Back then, my clansmen were killed before me one by one. Today, I will turn you into a pile of bones before your own clansmen," Kaya said through gritted teeth. Soon afterward, she swung her finger, and a crack immediately appeared in the space before her. With a deep buzz, winged ants poured out like a flood. There were countless numbers of them, and in just a few seconds, the ants had flooded the region. They filled up every inch within the barrier. These are the soaring ants that live in the depths of the divine realm, known as the killers of the divine realm. Their bodies are as tough as steel, and they specialize in absorbing and devouring energy. They are even immune to energy attacks, able to overcome any spatial abilities. How have the soaring ants of the depths of the divine realm ended up here? The guests had not traveled very far outside the barrier. When they saw the barrier filled with ants, their expression dramatically changed, and they cried out in disbelief. The tiny beast on Kaya stood up as well. Only then was it possible to see that it was a soaring ant as well. It was only the size of a fist, but it radiated a large amount of pressure. The tiny beast buzzed on Kaya's shoulder, and all of the ants that were wildly flying around surged toward the clansmen of the TYT tribe. Chapter 15:13. Wiping out 5 clans consecutively immediately, miserable cries rang from the TYT tribe. Soaring ants crawled on all of the clansmen there. All of the people were covered by countless soaring ants as far as the eye could see. Even the strongest ancestor was not an exception. The soaring ants produced chilling gnawing sounds as they devoured the flesh and blood of the people inside. Coupled with the endless cries of agony, the clan that had been joyful moments before had become hell in a single moment. Outside the barrier, all the guests stared at the hellish clan in fear. Many of them had paled from fright. They sensed that the famed TYT tribe in the region was making its way toward devastation right before their eyes. In just a few seconds, ants began to take to the sky again. Their wings buzzed as they revolved around Kaya. White skeletons were left on the ground. All the body's flesh and blood had been devoured by the ants. Gradually, more and more ants returned to the air. With their departure, the number of skeletons on the ground rapidly increased. Faced with the ants that were known as the killers of the divine realm, the clan did not even have the ability to fight back. Even their saint ruler ancestor could only angrily roar in agony. He could only watch as several dozen powerful ants gnawed away at his body, remaining glued to him. A while later, the ground was filled with skeletons. Apart from the saint ruler ancestor, who continued to roar out in pain, there was no one else alive. All the clansmen had been devoured, leaving behind white skeletons. Even the ancestor of the TYT tribe had been reduced to white bones apart from his untouched head. He was a terrifying sight. The soaring ants did not kill the saint ruler. Once they ate all the flesh on him, they flew back into the sky. Kaya hovered in the air as she coldly watched this unfold. She showed no mercy at all. She slowly raised her hand and controlled the space around the ancestor of the TYT tribe. She made his body levitate and coldly informed him, "Look at the current situation of your clan. All these clansmen have died because of you. If you hadn't wiped out my clan before, your own clan would not have suffered like this either. From today on, the TYT tribe will cease to exist in the sea realm." The ancestor of the TYT tribe was ashen, but his gaze remained fixed on Kaya. He said through gritted teeth, "I am regretful. I am filled with regret over how I let you escape. I regret how I didn't go into the depths of the divine realm to kill you. If I had known you'd improve so quickly, the 5 of us would have pursued you into the depths, even if it meant risking our lives." A cold light flashed through Kaya's eyes. They filled with killing intent in a single moment. Extending a finger, a powerful energy shot out and pierced the saint ruler's forehead. He died on the spot. The tiny beast on Kaya's shoulder immediately flew over. It moved extremely quickly, only leaving behind a faint blur. When it returned to Kaya, it actually carried a space ring with its 2 front legs, passing it to Kaya, as if it was trying to get on her good side. Kaya seemed to have realized that the tiny beast was extremely clever an extremely long time ago, so she did not find its actions surprising at all. She accepted the space ring from the tiny beast, putting it away without even looking through it. Afterward, she slashed at the space before her with a finger, and it immediately ripped open. The countless soaring ants above the TYT tribe seemed to have found their way back, gathering from all 4 directions and disappearing into the crack like a flood. Kaya left after the final soaring ant entered the crack. She continued to the next clan. The barrier around the TYT tribe vanished, and the guests who had left before remained in a daze. They stared at the lifeless clan and felt extremely disturbed. A medium-sized clan with a saint ruler had just been destroyed. It had only taken around a minute from beginning to end. This deeply shocked every single one of them. A while later, someone returned to their senses. They seemed to think of something, and their face was flooded with joy. They lunged toward the remaining skeletons and began collecting space rings. The other people returned to their senses as well. They all eagerly charged toward the space rings. There were even a few people who began fighting over them. The space rings had all been perfectly preserved. Kaya had only taken the most important one, leaving the rest behind. Kaya visited the Golden Sword tribe, Herman tribe, Dakar clan, and Tingwei clan and destroyed all of them, leaving no one alive. No one looked into who had wiped out the 5 medium-sized clans in a single day, nor did anyone stand up for them. However, the way all the people had been killed caught everyone's attention. This was because all the people from the 5 clans had been reduced to skeletons. There was flesh or blood left. Even the saint rulers were not exceptions. While everyone was wondering how the people had lost all their flesh and blood, the shocking news that the young lady of the Kaler tribe, Kaya, was with a group of soaring ants, which only appeared in the divine realm, broke out, spreading from the Tyt tribe. This shook the entire sea realm, and even caught significant attention from the 3 halls of the sea realm. In a bustling, large city within the sea realm, a woman who wore white clothes and had a tiny beast laying on her shoulder sat in an inn. She stared outside in a daze, numbly gazing at the bustling street. She was Kaya, who had just wiped out 5 clans and shook up the sea realm. Kaya had finally avenged the Kaler tribe by making the Tyt tribe, Golden Sword tribe, Herman tribe, Dakar clan, and Tingwei clan vanish from the sea realm. However, she did not lighten up at all. There was only a heavy sorrow in her heart. She had killed all her enemies, but she was unable to bring back her dead clansmen. She was unable to save her dead father either, which was why her emotions were still filled with sadness. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support. And don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.